My brother hasn't changed a single diaper in 4 years of fatherhood, and somehow I'm the villain in this story. So here's what happened. My sister-in-law, Lydia, vanished one morning, left behind a letter and 2 little girls, and my brother Greg's first instinct wasn't to call the police or even check if she was alive. It was to call her mom and ask her to move in. When mom couldn't stay, he turned to me demanding I either move into his house or take his kids entirely, because apparently fatherhood is just something women do for him. I'm 30 years old, I have my own life, and I am losing my mind. Greg is 34. Lydia is around my age. Our mom Donna is 60 and already stretched thin caring for our dad Roy, who's 65 and not doing well. And then there's Patrice, Lydia's mom, who knows a lot more than she's letting on. Let me give you the background because it matters. Greg and Lydia got married 6 years ago. She was 24, finishing a community college degree in dental hygiene. She was 3 semesters from done. I remember because she talked about it at their engagement dinner. Her eyes lit up, describing the program, the clinic hours, the patients she'd already worked with. Greg smiled through it the way you smile through a child's piano recital. Patient, tolerant, waiting for it to end. She never finished. After the wedding, Greg decided they didn't need 2 incomes. His words, not mine. What he meant was, he didn't need a wife with somewhere to be that wasn't home. First it was, take a semester off, settle in. Then it was, we're trying for a baby, the timing's bad. Then Maisie came and the conversation was over. Lydia stopped bringing it up. I noticed. Nobody else did, or nobody else cared. By the time Harper was born 2 years later, Lydia had become a ghost in her own house. Quiet, efficient. She cooked, cleaned, managed, 2 kids under 3, handled every appointment, every grocery run, every 2 a.m. fever. Greg worked a decent sales job and came home to a cooked meal and a cold beer like he was clocking into a second shift of being served. I am not exaggerating about the diapers. At Maisie's 3rd birthday party, I watched Greg hand Harper mid-blowout, screaming directly to Lydia, who was frosting a cake with one hand and keeping Maisie from sticking her fingers in a candle with the other. He said, "She needs you," and walked back to the living room to watch football with Roy. I looked at my mother. Donna looked at the floor. That's the house Lydia left. The letter was short. Lydia didn't explain much, just said she was sorry she loved the girls and she couldn't do this anymore. She asked Greg to be the father he'd never been. She left it on the kitchen counter next to a week's worth of pre-made meals and labeled Tupperware. Even in leaving, she took care of him. Greg called Donna at 6:47 a.m. I know the exact time because Donna called me at 6:52 already crying. Not because Lydia was missing, because Greg was asking her to come stay. He can't handle the girls alone, she said. He doesn't know their routines. They're his children, I said. I know, but his children. Silence. Then I'll just go for a few days. Until he sorts it out. She went for 11 days. During those 11 days, Greg did not call the police, did not contact Lydia's friends, did not call Patrice, did not Google how to make oatmeal. Donna cooked, cleaned, did school drop-off for Maisie, and managed Harper's nap schedule, while also calling home 3 times a day to make sure Roy had taken his blood pressure medication and eaten something. Roy, to his credit, lasted 9 days before he called Greg directly and said, "Send my wife home. I'm not dying alone, so you can have a maid." Roy is not a gentle man. But he wasn't wrong. When Donna came home, Greg called me. Not to ask how I was, not to update me on the girls. He opened with, "So mom can't stay anymore and I need someone here." I waited. I actually waited because part of me thought the next sentence would be a question about Lydia. Where she might be. Whether she was safe. Whether someone should be looking for her. Can you come stay for a while? Or honestly, could you just take the girls? You've got that second bedroom. My second bedroom is my office. I work from home. I freelance. That room is how I pay rent. Greg. Have you called the police? She left a note. She wasn't kidnapped. Have you called Patrice? Lydia's mom. Why would I call her? Because your wife is times missing asterisk. She's not missing, she left. There's a difference. I need help with the girls, not a detective. I pressed my thumbnail into my palm so hard it left a crescent mark that lasted an hour. I'm not moving into your house. Then I'm not taking your children. So what am I supposed to do? Be their father. He hung up on me. Within 48 hours, I'd gotten calls from Donna, Roy, and Greg's best friend Mike, all delivering variations of the same message times. You're being selfish. Those are your nieces. Family steps up. Asterisk, Donna cried. Roy called me cold. Mike, who I've spoken to maybe 6 times in my life, told me I'd regret this when the girls were older. Nobody, not one person said Greg should learn to parent. Not once. The entire family was engaged in a frantic search, not for Lydia, but for the next woman willing to erase herself into that house. I held the line. But the comments on my original post started worrying me. People were asking hard questions. Asterisk. Has anyone actually confirmed Lydia is alive? Have you checked with her mother? This sounds like it could be something worse than leaving. Asterisk. So on day 14, hands shaking, I called Patrice. She picked up on the first ring. And the second I said, I just want to make sure Lydia is safe. Greg hasn't filed a police report, but I'm thinking maybe someone should. Her voice went tight and fast in a way that made every hair on my arm stand up. Please, she said. Please don't file anything. The silence on Patrice's end lasted 3 seconds. It felt like 30. Patrice, I said carefully. Why not? She's safe. That's all I can tell you. She's safe, and she's working on things. Please. If someone files a report, they'll look for her, and if they find her, her voice cracked, not the way Donna's cracks, which is performative, designed to pull you into compliance. Patrice cracked like a window hit by a rock, sudden, structural, irreversible. She can't come back to that house, Patrice said. You understand, she times cannot asterisk. I understood. I'd understood since the engagement dinner. Did you help her leave? Another silence. Then very quietly, I drove her to the bus station. I sat down on my kitchen floor. Not because I was shocked, because my legs decided independently of my brain that this conversation required a lower center of gravity. I pressed my back against the cabinet and stared at the ceiling. Where is she? I can't tell you that. I'm not going to tell Greg. I know you're not. But I promised her. She's somewhere she can finish. That's all I'll say. Asterisk. Finish. Asterisk. 3 semesters. 6 years late. I closed my eyes and saw Lydia at that engagement dinner, describing the bite wing X-ray technique she'd perfected, and Greg checking his phone under the table. Patrice. The girls. I know. Her voice went thin as paper. You think I don't know. You think I sleep. Someone has to. She'll call you, Patrice said. Give her a day. She'll call you herself. Just please. No police, no reports, no Greg. She hung up before I could answer. Lydia called at 1140 p.m. The next night, from a number with an area code I didn't recognize. I was still awake. I'd been awake since Patrice's call, more or less running every scenario through my head, like cards through a shuffler. None of them came up clean. It's me, she said. Her voice was different. Not broken, not hollow. Asterisk. Stripped. Asterisk. Like someone who'd sanded off every unnecessary layer and was speaking from raw wood. Are you okay? I'm enrolled. Started Monday. I have a room. I have a job at a grocery store, deli counter, 22 hours a week. I'm okay. She said it like a list. Like she'd rehearsed it. Like she knew I'd need the facts before I could hear the rest. Lydia, I know what you're going to say. You left your kids. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. Then she inhaled ragged wet the sound of someone who has cried so much their lungs have memorized the rhythm and said, I know leaving the kids was wrong. She cried when she said she knew and hoped they could forgive her. She really couldn't live this life anymore. Leaving them was the hardest decision she ever made, but she felt it was better than taking them and letting them starve with her. At least here, they have a home and family. I did ask why she couldn't just divorce my brother then. She said she didn't have the money for a lawyer or anything. No home to return to. She's not proud of it, but said she couldn't stay and fight. 6 years without income, without a degree, without a bank account. Greg didn't monitor. She'd done the math. She'd done it over and over, lying awake next to him while he snored, and every version ended the same way, destitute in a shelter with 2 children she couldn't feed. She didn't tell me where exactly she was. Didn't want to risk it. Asked me not to give her number to my family. I did tell her about the situation with her kids, how Greg handed them off like luggage, how he'd called Donna, then me, then tried to pawn them entirely, how he still hadn't filed a single document or made a single phone call to find her, how his first and only instinct every time was to locate the nearest woman and transfer the weight. She went quiet for a long time. Then she just said, my brother will figure it out. She cannot help in any way right now. She will come back to her babies when she can. Good grief, I wanted to argue with her. I wanted to say times those girls wake up every morning and you're not there. Asterisk. But I thought about Greg handing a screaming Harper to Lydia while she frosted a cake, and I realized those girls have been waking up every morning with one functional parent for their entire lives. They just didn't know it was only one. So now I carry this. Lydia's number saved under a fake name. Patrice's secret sitting in my chest like a swallowed stone. The knowledge that my sister-in-law is in another state working a deli counter and studying dental anatomy, building the life my brother dismantled before it started. Greg called again yesterday. Same script. The girls are out of control. Maisie won't stop asking for mama. Harper has a diaper rash he doesn't know how to treat. He said, and I quote, "This isn't sustainable." I almost laughed. 6 years of Lydia doing everything alone that was sustainable, 2 weeks of Greg doing a fraction of it, and the whole structure collapses. Donna has started going over on weekends. She looks exhausted. Roy calls me every few days to complain that his wife is being borrowed again. The irony, Roy, who never cooked a meal in 65 years, angry that his domestic support has been redirected to another man who never cooked a meal, is so thick I could choke on it. Nobody asks about Lydia anymore. She's been replaced in the conversation by logistics. Who's covering Tuesday? Who's handling the pediatrician? Who's buying diapers? The family has moved from times where is she times to times, who's next times, without ever passing through times why did she go? Asterisk. And I sit here holding a burner phone number in a secret and the growing unbearable understanding that nothing in this family will change. Greg will not become a father. He will find another woman, a girlfriend, a neighbor, a church volunteer, and the cycle will reset. Maisie will grow up watching it. Harper won't remember anything else. Lydia asked me not to tell. So I won't. But I needed to tell someone. She spent 4 years trying to be number one, and she got her wish, just not the ranking she wanted. By graduation, she was first on a list. Nobody wants to top the person. Literally no one in our class could stand to be around. So here's the short version. My best friend turned into my worst enemy the moment I outranked her, and she went nuclear fabricating rumors about me sleeping with a professor, sabotaging her own boyfriend's grades so she could beat him, and burning every bridge in our college. She thought she was playing chess. She was playing herself. I'm a 21-year-old girl who just wanted to study in peace. Shay was my ride-or-die best friend turned full-time saboteur. Tom's our class topper who Shay started dating not because she liked him but because she wanted to destroy him from the inside. Professor Arjun is a young professor whose career Shay nearly ended with a lie. And Rohan is my cousin, the guy who accidentally connected all the dots. Buckle up because this one gets ugly. Let me take you back to first year because that's where the rot started even if it looked like friendship at the time. Shay and I met during orientation week, bonded over the fact that we were both the kind of psychotic that color-coded our notes before the first lecture had even happened. She had this energy, magnetic intense, the kind of girl who'd grab your arm during a conversation and make you feel like you were the only person in the room. We became inseparable within days. Studied together, ate together, dissected every professor's grading rubric like it was a treasure map. And here's the thing, it worked. First semester, we both placed in the top 10. Second semester, top 5. We'd quiz each other at midnight, share resources, split textbook costs. I genuinely believed I'd found my person. The kind of friend you build your entire college experience around? The cracks didn't show until third semester rankings dropped. I placed second. Shay placed 7th. And I swear I watched something behind her eyes just switch off. She didn't congratulate me. She didn't even acknowledge it. When I texted her that night times, dude, we both killed it. Let's celebrate time she left me on red. The next morning, she walked past me in the corridor like I was furniture. No nod, no eye contact. Nothing. I told myself she was having a bad day. Maybe family stuff. Maybe she was disappointed in her own rank and needed space. I gave her a week. That week turned into a month. The month turned into the rest of the semester. She didn't just distance herself, she times replaced times me, surgically. Within weeks, she'd attached herself to Tom, our class topper, the guy who'd held the number one spot since first semester like it was his birthright. Suddenly, they were studying together, sitting together, sharing notes in a way that felt uncomfortably familiar. Like she'd taken our entire friendship blueprint and carbon copied it onto someone more useful. I'd be lying if I said it didn't gut me, but I swallowed it. Kept my head down, studied harder. Fourth semester rolled around and I climbed to first. Tom dropped to second. Shay hovered around 5th. That's when things went from cold to radioactive. It started as a whisper. A classmate I barely knew pulled me aside after a lecture and asked, with this weird half smile, "So, you and Professor Arjun, huh?" My stomach dropped. What? People are saying you guys are like a thing. That's how you're topping. I almost laughed. Professor Arjun was 28 engaged, and the only reason I even knew him outside class was because he was friends with my cousin Rohan. They'd gone to the same university. He'd come over for dinner at Rohan's place once while I was there, and we'd talked about coursework for maybe 15 minutes. That was it. The entire basis of whatever this was. Who's saying this? I asked. She shrugged. Wouldn't give me a name, but I didn't need one. I already knew. The rumor metastasized fast. Within 2 weeks, it wasn't just that I was sleeping with a professor, it was that he'd leaked exam papers to me, that my grades were manufactured, that the whole thing was transactional. I'd walk into class and conversations would die. Group project invitations dried up. A faculty member I respected started treating me with this stiff formal distance that made my skin crawl. And Professor Arjun God, his situation was worse. He told Rohan later that colleagues had started giving him looks. His department head made a pointed comment about maintaining professional boundaries. His fiancée heard a version of the rumor from someone's sister who went to our college. The man was fighting fires in every direction and he hadn't done a single thing wrong. Meanwhile, Shay and Tom were officially a thing. She used to call Tom to her house asking him to teach her before exams, and that's how they started dating each other. At least that's the version that circulated. Some people also said she was involved with one of the junior boys. I took all this gossip with a pinch of salt, but I was betting the second one to be false. You never know though. After returning from college one day, I visited Rohan. Gave him the hot gossip going around campus. He said the last time he'd met Professor Arjun, the professor, had mentioned something of this sort was happening. The rumors, the professional fallout, all of it. We both had a good laugh, the dark kind, the kind where you're actually furious but don't know what else to do with it. Then Rohan called the professor right there, put him on speaker, and asked him what had happened in the dean's office. And what Professor Arjun said next made my blood go cold. He'd filed a formal complaint. The dean had launched an investigation. And every single thread, every whisper, every accusation, every poisoned conversation traced back to one source. Shay had been called in. She'd been formally warned. And she was Time's furious, asterisk. I sat in Rohan's living room phone, still on speaker, and felt something settle in my chest. Not relief, not satisfaction. Something harder. Something patient. Because I knew Shay. And I knew a formal warning wouldn't stop her. It would only make her more careful about who she destroyed next. I just didn't realize Tom was already mid-destruction and that I'd be the one to stumble onto the evidence. The stairwell thing happened on a Thursday. I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't looking for anything. Fifth semester had settled into a rhythm head, down notes, organized library until closing. I'd stopped thinking about Shay the way you stop thinking about a toothache after the nerve dies. She existed in my periphery, a shape I'd learned to navigate around. I'd stayed late to return a reference book to the department office on the 3rd floor. The building was mostly empty that post. 5 p.m. quiet where your footsteps echo too loud and the fluorescent lights buzz like they're personally offended you're still there. I took the back stairwell because the elevator was broken again, and I was 2 flights down when I heard it. Laughter. Low, breathy. Then a voice I'd recognize in my sleep honestly thinks I'm with him because I times like times him. It's pathetic. I froze. My hand tightened on the railing. Then a male voice, younger, unfamiliar. So what? You're just going to keep stringing him along until finals. Shay's voice was casual, almost bored. He's already dropped to 4th this semester. By the time I'm done, he won't crack top 10. And the beautiful part, he thinks I'm times helping times him. I rearranged his entire study schedule, cut his library hours in half, convinced him group study with my friends was more productive than solo revision. A pause. The wet sound of a kiss. He's so desperate to keep me happy, he doesn't even notice his GPA bleeding out. The junior boy laughed. That's cold. That's strategy. My back was pressed flat against the wall. I wasn't breathing. My phone was already in my hand. I don't remember pulling it out. Muscle memory, maybe. Or something older, something that had been waiting for exactly this moment since the day she left me on red. I opened the voice recorder. Hit the red button. Held the phone low-angled toward the gap in the stairwell. What about that rumor thing, the boy asked. Didn't you almost get expelled? Asterisk. Warned asterisk. There's a difference. And it was worth it. She was getting too comfortable at the top. Someone had to remind her she's nobody. A beat. Besides, the professor thing was genius. 2 birds, 1 lie. Her reputation, times his career. I just didn't account for him actually going to the dean. She said it like she was reviewing a chess move that hadn't panned out. Clinical. Annoyed at the miscalculation, not the cruelty. They kissed again. I heard her murmur something about meeting later, his footsteps retreating down the stairs below me. I didn't move for 3 full minutes after the stairwell went silent. My thumb hovered over the stop button, and I watched the recording timer tick past 4 minutes 37 seconds. I saved it, backed it up to my drive. Then I walked home with my heart slamming so hard I could feel it in my teeth. I didn't send it that night. I sat with it for 2 days, replaying it with earphones in, making sure every word was audible, making sure there was no ambiguity. Then I created a burner email, took me 20 minutes because my hands wouldn't stop shaking, and sent the audio file to Tom with 1 line, times. You deserve to know who she actually is. Asterisk. What happened next I only heard secondhand. But I heard it from enough people that the picture was sharp. Tom listened to the recording. Then he went quiet for a day, that dangerous quiet that people who've been genuinely betrayed go through before the dam breaks. He confronted Shay. She denied it. He asked to see her phone. She refused. He grabbed it. The messages were worse than the recording. Conversations with 3 different people where she detailed her strategy for tanking his grades. Screenshots she'd sent to her school friends bragging about managing him. A group chat where she joked about how easy he was to manipulate because he was emotionally needy. Tom copied everything. Every message, every screenshot, every damning line. And he dropped it all into the class WhatsApp group at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I watched my phone light up with notification after notification. Opened the group, scrawled, and felt nothing. Not triumph, not vindication, just a vast flat calm like watching a building you'd already evacuated finally collapse. By morning, it was everywhere. Tom's mother called Shay. Then she called Shay's mother. I don't know exactly what was said, but a classmate who was at Tom's house that day told me his mother's voice carried through 2 closed doors and the phrase raised a snake was used more than once. Shay's mother apparently cried. Shay apparently didn't. The college farewell was 3 months later. By then, the social math had been done and the numbers were final. Shay arrived in a green sari, makeup, perfect posture straight. She walked in like nothing had happened, and for about 10 minutes it almost worked. Then the photos started. Groups forming arms around shoulders, people pulling each other into frame. Nobody pulled Shay. She stood at the edge of clusters, half smiling, waiting for an invitation that never came. I watched her from across the hall. Not with satisfaction, with something closer to recognition. She'd spent 3 years engineering everyone else's isolation, and now she was standing inside the architecture she'd built, except she'd built it around herself. Tom was across the room laughing with friends, lighter than I'd seen him in a year. Professor. Arjun's name had been formally cleared. Rohan told me the fiancé situation had stabilized, that the engagement was back on track. My name sat at the top of the final rankings, and for the first time it felt clean. Shay left the farewell 40 minutes early. No goodbye. No scene. She just picked up her clutch and walked out through the side door while the rest of us were mid-group photo. Nobody noticed she'd gone. And honestly, that was the most devastating thing of all. Not anger, not confrontation, just absence. The complete, frictionless ease with which a room full of people continued without her. She'd spent years trying to be first. In the end, she wasn't even last. She just wasn't counted. I kept my wife's secret life hidden for 7 years, not because she asked me to, but because innocent people would have gotten hurt. She mistook my silence for weakness. That was the last mistake I'll let her make. So here's the short version. I discovered my spouse had been living an entire parallel existence. We're talking years of hidden encounters, secret content, the works. And instead of blowing it all up, I went quiet, engineered my exit. Over 4 months of living together like nothing was wrong, and offered her one deal. Silence for silence. She couldn't take it. Now the only thing standing between her and total exposure is a thread she won't stop pulling. I'm in my early 30s, male. My ex-wife is Vanessa, 32, and the most meticulous liar I've ever shared a bed with. Before her there was Claire, my first ex, who taught me what betrayal felt like at a beginner level. And then there's Mia, who came along later and proved to me that not everyone operates like that. But this story isn't really about any of them. This story is about what happens when you give someone everything they wanted, and the only price was leaving you alone, and they still couldn't do it. Let me back up, because you need to understand what I thought I was walking away from versus what I actually found. Claire was my training ground. Married young, divorced younger. She left for someone she said could provide stability, which was code for a guy who paid for things while she figured out who she wanted to be that week. It stung. It scarred. But it was simple betrayal, the kind you can explain over a beer, and your buddy nods because he's seen it before. Claire taught me that people leave. That was the whole lesson. Vanessa taught me that some people never leave. They just build a second life and let you fund the first one. We met 2 years after Claire. I was cautious. Vanessa was patient. She had this way of making you feel like the only source of gravity in her universe. Everything orbited you. Date nights were sacred. She remembered details about my childhood I'd mentioned once in passing half asleep. She'd text me during work just to say she was thinking about me, not performatively, not with the desperate frequency of someone overcompensating, just enough. Always exactly enough. We married after 18 months, bought a place together, built routines. I thought I'd figured out the formula, find someone who shows up consistently, who doesn't make you guess, who treats your vulnerability like something worth protecting. Vanessa did all of that. For 7 years, she did all of that. The discovery wasn't dramatic. No lipstick on a collar, no suspicious phone buzzing at 2 a.m. It was a browser tab. She'd been using my laptop, hers was updating, and when I opened it later that evening, there it was. A dashboard. Not a dating app. A Times platform asterisk. Subscriber counts, earnings history, message threads going back years. Content I won't describe here, but I'll say this. I was not in any of it, and the timestamps predated our wedding. My hands didn't shake. That's the part that still unsettles me. I sat there at the kitchen island, her laughter floating in from the living room where she was watching some cooking show, and my hands were perfectly still. I clicked through everything with the calm of someone reading a quarterly report. Subscriber messages, revealed names. Names revealed social media profiles. Profiles revealed couples times, married times couples. She'd been meeting for group encounters going back to before our first anniversary. Some of these people had kids. Some of them were in our broader social circle. I closed the laptop. I made us both tea. I brought hers to the couch and sat beside her and watched the rest of that cooking show, and laughed when she laughed, and went to bed at our usual time and lay there in the dark while she fell asleep with her hand on my chest. I did not sleep that night. Or the next 3. Here's what people don't understand about discovery like this. The betrayal isn't the worst part. The worst part is the times recalculation asterisk. Every memory gets audited. Every business trip, every girls' weekend, every Thursday evening yoga class that ran long, all of it feeds back through this new filter, and the math changes on 7 years of your life in about 45 minutes. You don't grieve the person. You grieve the person you thought existed. I made my decision by day 4. I would leave. But I would leave times correctly, asterisk. The house was in both our names, but the mortgage was structured in a way that gave me leverage. I spent 2 weeks with a lawyer before I said a single word to Vanessa. I got my exit architecture in place, sole ownership, transfer, financial separation, the works, and then I told her I knew. Not everything. I told her I'd found the content platform. I left out the names, the couples, the depth. I wanted to see what she'd volunteer. She volunteered tears. Magnificent, shuddering, full-body tears. She grabbed my forearms and her nails, left half moons in my skin, and she said, "It was just money. It didn't mean anything I was going to tell you." When I was times working up to it, asterisk. For 7 years. Silence. Then more crying. Then the pivot I'd been waiting for. I'll stop. I already stopped. I deleted everything. She hadn't. I checked that morning. What followed was 4 months of cohabitation that I can only describe as living inside a performance. Vanessa cycled through every mode, sobbing penitent, angry accuser, seductive reconciler, cold roommate, sobbing penitent again. She'd leave handwritten letters on my pillow. She'd cook my favorite meals and set the table for 2 with candles. She'd corner me in the hallway at midnight, eyes swollen, voice cracking. "You can't just times shut me out, times I'm still your wife." I kept my voice level every single time. I ate the meals, I read the letters, I slept in the guest room, and I worked the plan. The papers were nearly ready. The house transfer was almost finalized. I'd severed myself financially from every joint account, every shared obligation, every thread that tethered me to her. And then, on a Tuesday evening in month 3, Vanessa sat across from me at the kitchen island, the same island where I'd first found everything, and said something that made every muscle in my back go rigid. I told my mother, "You've been having mental health episodes. Just so you know. In case you were thinking about talking to anyone about us." In case you were thinking about talking to anyone about us, she said it while peeling an orange, casual, like she was mentioning a change in the weather. The rind came off in one long spiral, and she separated a segment and ate it, and looked at me with eyes that had absolutely nothing behind them. I understood then fully cellularly that I had never known this woman. "Noted," I said. That was the last real conversation we had under the same roof. The final 6 weeks were surgical. I finished the paperwork. I secured sole ownership. I packed while she was at work, not because I was hiding, but because I was done performing proximity. On the day I left, I placed the settlement agreement on the kitchen island with a single post-it note, asterisk, asterisk, silence for silence. This is the only deal. Asterisk, asterisk. The terms were simple. I would never disclose what I'd found. Not the platform, not the names, not the couples with children who'd been part of her parallel life. In return, she would never contact me again. No calls, no texts, no messages through friends, no narrative campaigns. Complete and permanent severance. Vanessa signed it the same day. Her lawyer called mine and said she was relieved and grateful for his discretion. That relief lasted 11 days. The first breach was soft. A mutual friend, Derek, called to check in with a tone so rehearsed I could hear the stage directions. He mentioned how times worried times Vanessa was about my state of mind. He used the phrase dark place twice. He asked if I'd considered talking to someone professional the way you'd suggest it to a man standing on a ledge. Derek: "Did she tell you to call me?" Long pause. "She just cares about you, man." I hung up. I did not call back. The second breach was louder. My sister forwarded me a screenshot. Vanessa had messaged her on Instagram, expressing deep concern about my mental health, referencing episodes that never happened, asking my sister to keep an eye on him. My sister, to her credit, saw through it instantly. But the fact that Vanessa had reached into my times, family times, that she'd touched, that something shifted in my chest. A load-bearing wall developed its first crack. The third, fourth, and fifth breaches blurred together. A coworker mentioned that someone had reached out to HR to express concern about my well-being. A college friend I hadn't spoken to in years texted asking if I was okay. My gym buddy said Vanessa had shown up at his wife's book club, a book club she'd never attended, and spent 20 minutes painting a portrait of a man unraveling. She was building a preemptive defense. If I ever talked, I'd be the unstable ex-husband lashing out. She wasn't grieving. She was times constructing asterisk. Each time I said nothing publicly. Each time I contacted her lawyer with a formal notice of breach. Each time her lawyer assured mine it wouldn't happen again. It always happened again. Month 5, post-separation, I stopped tracking the breaches. Not because they stopped, but because counting them had become its own prison. I was living in a studio apartment across town, rebuilding from the studs, and every time I felt the floor solidify beneath me, another call would come. Another concerned voice, another whisper network she'd fed. The friends went first. I cut every mutual connection. Not with announcements, not with explanations, just silence. Phones unanswered. Invitations declined. I became a ghost in a social circle I'd spent 7 years building because every node in that network was a potential channel back to her. Then family. Her mother, who I genuinely loved, called me crying one night saying Vanessa was devastated and I was being cruel. I listened to the whole thing. I said, "I'm sorry, you're in pain. I hope she finds peace." I never picked up that number again. The loneliness of that period was architectural. It wasn't sadness. It was the experience of standing in a building after every wall has been removed. Wind moving through spaces that used to be rooms. Here's where I am now. I work as we speak out of country 4 months. But I'm coming back after, and we are moving into a house we've bought together and is being built as I type we, being me and Mia, who I met 14 months ago through the most unremarkable introduction imaginable. A friend of a friend. Coffee that turned into dinner that turned into a Tuesday morning where she looked at me across her kitchen and said, "You don't have to perform being okay. You can just be whatever you are right now." I can honestly say I have zero concern about what she's doing back home because I trust her fully, which I didn't think was possible to do again 3 years ago. I'm going to go home in 4 months, see her and my cat, and have an amazing Christmas, hopefully proposing in the new year. Things have moved quickly for us, and I honestly would have never given much thought to my ex. I don't think I realized how much I didn't think about her anymore until I was curating my Facebook about 3 months ago and saw a slew of old pictures of me and her together. I had removed everything about her previously, or so I thought. Turns out she unblocked herself from my account, I still don't know how, and had been viewing my posts, my photos with Mia, my new life. Watching, still orbiting. That's when I found out the Whisper campaign never stopped. It just went underground. New people, new stories. A version of me that exists in her telling volatile, broken, dangerous, walking around in the minds of people I've never met. So here's the calculus. I offered silence for silence. I held my end for 3 years. I protected names, marriages, families with children who don't know what their parents did on alternating Saturdays. I did that not for Vanessa. I did it for times them asterisk, but the deal is broken. She broke it so many times the document is confetti. And the song, every name, every timestamp, every couple who trusted the discretion of a stranger more than they trusted their own vows, that song is composed. It has been for years. I've just never pressed play. Vanessa had everything. Her secret life, her freedom, her narrative. All she had to do was walk away. She couldn't. Now the only question is whether I'm merciful enough to keep a promise that only one of us ever honored. I'm running out of reasons to say yes. My wife's brother moved in with us 3 months ago. Except he wasn't her brother, and he wasn't gay. And everything I thought I knew about the woman I married was a lie she'd been building since before our first date. So here's the short version. My wife convinced me to take in her supposedly disowned brother who was fresh out of rehab. Turns out he was actually her drug addict boyfriend she never broke up with, and she fabricated an entire family backstory, conservative parents, a painful estrangement, all of it just to keep this man close while married to me. I'm 32 male. My wife is Renee, 28, and genuinely one of the sharpest people I've ever met, which makes all of this worse. The man she moved into our home is Marco, 27, and her parents, Gerald and Diane, are the warm, lovely people Renee told me she'd been disowned by. They hadn't disowned anyone. They didn't even know Marco existed. Let me back up to where this started because the lie didn't begin with Marco moving in. It began on our second date. Renee told me about her family over cheap pasta at a place that doesn't exist anymore. She said her parents were deeply conservative, the kind who monitored her phone until she was 20, who refused to let her study out of state, who saw any deviation from their plan as betrayal. She said she'd clawed her way out, moved cities, cut contact, built herself from nothing. I remember sitting across from her thinking, times this woman is extraordinary. Asterisk. She told me her younger brother had come out as gay and her parents had disowned him completely, changed the locks, removed his photos. She said she'd tried to intervene and they'd cut her off too. She cried telling me this. Real tears, or what I believed were real tears. Her voice cracked in the right places. Her hands shook holding her wine glass. I fell in love with her courage before I fell in love with her. We married 14 months later. Her family didn't attend the wedding. I never questioned it. Why would I? The story was airtight. She had a stepbrother named Ryan from Gerald's first marriage, and she'd mentioned him exactly twice in passing enough to establish he existed, never enough for me to dig. I realize now she rationed every detail like someone managing inventory. Then 3 months ago, she told me her brother had finally gone to rehab. She said he'd reached out. She said he had nowhere to go. She asked if we could take him in temporarily, just until he got stable. His name was Marco. I said yes because I loved her, and because I thought I was helping someone she loved. Marco arrived with a duffel bag and the kind of exhaustion that made him look 10 years older than 27. He was polite, quiet, grateful. He called me man a lot. He slept on our pull-out couch and did the dishes without being asked. But things didn't sit right almost immediately. The first thing was the name. Renee's last name before marriage was Bellamy. Her parents were the Bellamys. Marco's last name, which I saw on a piece of mail that arrived for him in our mailbox the second week, was Reyes. I asked Renee about it casually. She said he'd legally changed it after the disownment wanted nothing to do with the family name. I nodded. Filed it away. The second thing was the whispering. They whispered constantly. In the kitchen when I was in the living room. On the balcony when I was showering. Once I came home early and they were sitting on the couch with a gap between them that looked recently manufactured, like two magnets pulled apart by a third hand. Marco stood up too fast. Renee smiled too wide. The third thing was that Marco never talked about the family. Not once. A man supposedly disowned by his parents, freshly sober, living in his sister's apartment, and he never mentioned them. Never said their names. Never expressed anger or grief, or anything at all about the people who'd supposedly destroyed his life. I posted about it online. Anonymous, vague. Just the broad strokes, wife's brother living with us, different surname, weird energy, constant private conversations. The responses split into two camps. Half said I was paranoid. The other half sent me links to threads I wish I'd never read. Wives who'd moved lovers into the family home disguised as cousins, brothers, old college friends. The playbook was almost standardized. Fabricate a sympathetic backstory. Exploit the husband's empathy. Install the other man under his roof. I read those threads for 4 hours. My hands were steady the entire time. Something in me had already known. I started building my case quietly. I asked Marco if he'd be willing to put together a resume so I could help him find work. He agreed. The resume listed his education, his work history, his full legal name, Marco Antonio Reyes. No mention of Bellamy. No name change documentation. The timeline of his employment showed continuous residence in a city 4 hours from Renee's hometown. He hadn't grown up where she grew up. He hadn't grown up in her family at all. That weekend, I told Renee I had a work trip near her hometown. I suggested she come along so we could visit her parents. I framed it casually already, knowing she'd refuse proximity to her actual parents was the one variable she couldn't control, so it was easier for her to say no. As expected, she said she was busy, but she kept asking me if I would be visiting her parents. I said no, I won't visit them alone. We can plan for the next time. In reality, I had no work trip. I went to her hometown only to meet her parents and uncover her truth. I don't want to get into the details of how I sourced their address. It was on her ID. So I went to their house and immediately told them not to reveal this to Renee because I was planning a surprise for her. Renee's birthday was around the corner a day after tomorrow. So I told them that I was arranging a surprise party for Renee and went there to invite them in person. They were pleased to receive me. Gerald shook my hand with both of his. Diane hugged me in the doorway. Their home was warm, cluttered with family photos, and nothing times about these people suggested the cold, controlling fundamentalists Renee had described. While speaking to them, I eventually opened up and told them that they don't seem conservative at all, not the way Renee had described. Gerald's face changed. Diane set down her tea. Conservative, Gerald said. We begged that girl to stay. I asked about their son. Gerald said, Ryan's in Seattle. We talk every Sunday. I asked carefully if they had another son, a younger one, named Marco. They looked at each other, then back at me, who Diane said slowly is Marco. I drove back to the hotel that night with every window down 80 miles an hour on an empty highway, and the only thought cycling through my head was this. Right now in my apartment, in the home I pay for, Renee and Marco are alone together. And they know exactly what they are to each other. Her birthday was in 2 days, and her parents had just accepted my invitation. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of anger. Anger would have been simpler. I lay in that hotel bed running the math on every conversation, every tear, every perfectly rationed detail she'd fed me over 3 years, and what kept me awake was the precision. This wasn't impulsive. This was architecture. I drove home the next morning, one day before her birthday. Marco was eating cereal at the kitchen counter, and Renee was blow-drying her hair in the bathroom. Everything looked normal. Everything had always looked normal. That was the craft of it. How was the trip, she asked when I kissed her cheek. Productive, I said. Actually, I want to do something special for your birthday tomorrow. Stay home. I'll handle everything. She smiled. The same smile from our second date, the one I'd once mistaken for vulnerability. You don't have to do all that. I want to, I said. I really want to. I spent that day in a kind of surgical calm. I bought a cake. I ordered flowers. I texted Gerald and Diane the address and the time 6 o'clock come straight up the door would be open. Diane sent back a string of heart emojis and wrote that she couldn't wait to see her baby girl. I stared at that message for a long time. These people loved Renee. They had never stopped. She had invented their cruelty the way a novelist invents weather to set the scene for a character who doesn't exist. The morning of her birthday, Renee woke up happy. She stretched across the bed and pulled me toward her and said, 30 looks good on me, don't you think I told her it did? Marco knocked on the bedroom door and wished her happy birthday through the wood. She laughed. I watched the ease between them, the familiarity that I'd once read as sibling comfort, and I saw it clearly now. The way her voice softened half a register when she spoke to him. The way his knock was gentle, almost intimate, 2 taps instead of 3. I told her I was handling dinner. She should relax, get dressed up, enjoy the day. She spent the afternoon doing her makeup while Marco sat on the couch scrolling his phone. At one point I walked past and he looked up at me with those tired eyes and said, "This is really cool of you, man." "Family's important," I said. He nodded. He had no idea what he was nodding to. By 5:30, Renee was in a green dress, her hair pinned up, standing in the kitchen, finishing a salad she'd insisted on making because she said she couldn't just contribute nothing. Marco had changed into a clean shirt. The apartment smelled like garlic and candle wax and the ordinary machinery of a life that had never been real. At 5:58, my phone buzzed. Gerald times. We're in the lobby. Asterisk. I told Renee I'd forgotten something in the car and went downstairs. Gerald was wearing a blazer. Diane was holding a wrapped gift with a bow that looked like she'd spent an hour on it. I shook Gerald's hand, hugged Diane, and led them to the elevator. "She's going to be so surprised," Diane whispered. "Yes," I said. "She is." I opened the apartment door and stepped aside. Diane walked in first. Then Gerald. The hallway opens directly into the kitchen and living room, one continuous space, and Renee was standing at the counter with a knife in one hand and a tomato in the other, and Marco was 3 feet away leaning against the fridge. Diane said, "Baby?" Renee's head turned. The knife stopped. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Her eyes went from her mother to her father to me, and I watched the blood leave her face in real time like someone had pulled a plug at the base of her throat. Gerald stepped forward, arms open, and then he saw Marco. He stopped. His arms lowered. "What are you doing here?" Gerald said. Not to Renee, to Marco. Marco straightened. His mouth opened. Closed. "You know each other," I said. I already knew, but I needed the room to hear it. "That's Marco Reyes," Gerald said, his voice flattening into something I hadn't heard from him before. "He's the reason we almost lost our daughter." Renee set the knife down. Her hands were shaking. "Dad, let me." "He's been living here," I said, "for 3 months. Renee told me he was your son, that you disowned him for being gay." The silence that followed had texture. Diane's gift hit the floor. Gerald turned to Renee with an expression I can only describe as a man watching something he built catch fire. "Oh, I said Ryan didn't come." "It would have made things easier, isn't it?" Renee flinched, like I'd struck her. Gerald crossed the kitchen in 4 steps, grabbed Marco by the collar of his clean shirt, and dragged him toward the door. Marco didn't resist. He went limp the way someone goes limp when they've always known this moment was coming. Gerald shoved him into the hallway and pointed at the elevator and said something quiet I couldn't hear, and Marco walked away without looking back. Diane was crying. Renee was standing in her green birthday dress in the kitchen she'd been cooking in 2 minutes ago, and she looked at me, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw her without a story prepared. "How long?" she whispered. "Long enough," I said. The divorce took 11 weeks. She signed everything without contest. No negotiation, no lawyers jousting over assets. She showed up to the finalization alone, thinner, wearing no makeup. She didn't look at me. Gerald removed her from the family will. I know this because Diane called me 3 weeks after it was finalized, sobbing into the phone. She said Marco had relapsed. She said Renee was still with him. She said she didn't understand how her daughter, her brilliant, sharp, capable daughter, could throw away everything for a man who couldn't stay clean for 6 consecutive months. I didn't have an answer for her. I still don't. What I keep coming back to is this. Renee built an entire mythology. Cold parents, a disowned brother, a woman who'd clawed her way to freedom, and she built it so well that I married the character, not the person. Every detail measured, every tear placed. The woman I admired for her resilience was real, in a way I hadn't understood. She was times resilient. She maintained a lie across years, across a marriage, across the daily architecture of a shared life without a single crack I could see until a piece of mail arrived with the wrong name. That's not weakness. That's a kind of terrifying talent. And she spent all of it on Marco Reyes, a man who the last I heard was sleeping on someone's floor. I think about that sometimes. How the sharpest person I've ever known made the dumbest choice I've ever seen and made it over and over and over again and called it love. My family spent years telling me I was nothing, the homeless loser, the embarrassment nobody wanted at Thanksgiving. Funny how that works, because now every single one of them needs something from the house they tried to steal from me. So here's what happened. My golden child brother's scheming wife orchestrated a campaign to literally take my home, got publicly humiliated at Christmas, then got arrested for assault after a DNA test revealed she'd been sleeping with some bronze-tongued lout the entire marriage. And somehow she showed up at my doorstep blaming ME for ruining her life, all caught on camera. I'm a guy in my early 30s just trying to live in peace. My brother Dan married Vanessa, a woman whose entire personality was extracting resources from other people. My mom Lorraine is the classic keep the peace at any cost type. And my dad, Gerald, he's the silent patriarch who enabled all of it for decades. This is how it all finally came crashing down. After the Christmas party blow-up, I did something I should have done years ago. I stopped waiting for the next shoe to drop and started nailing shoes to the floor. First thing January, I installed cameras. Ring doorbell on the front, 2 Wise cams covering the driveway and back porch, and a blink system inside the garage. Cost me maybe $400 total. Best money I ever spent, though I didn't know that yet. Second thing, I rented out the 2 spare bedrooms. My buddy Marcus from the warehouse took one. A guy named Theo, who I'd known since community college, took the other. $300 a month each, utilities included. Not a fortune, but it covered the property taxes and then some. For the first time in my adult life, I had a financial cushion that wasn't made of anxiety. Third thing, I changed the locks. Again, the house was mine. Fully mine. I had the deed, the mortgage was current, and every legal challenge Vanessa had tried to mount during her campaign to steal it had been swatted down like a mosquito at a barbecue. But owning something and feeling safe in it are two different animals. I was learning to close the gap. Of course, peace was a language my family had never learned to speak. Lorraine called on a Tuesday evening, I remember because I was making chili, and Marcus was arguing with Theo about whether cornbread needed sugar. Sweetheart, she started, and I could already hear the script loading behind her eyes. I was just thinking, Dan and the boys are still in that tiny apartment, and you got those extra rooms, and it just seems like those rooms should have gone to family. To Dan's family. Those boys need space. And you're renting to strangers when your own nephews. Marcus and Theo aren't strangers. They're my friends. They pay rent. They help maintain the property. But times Dan's children, asterisk. Dan's children have a father who can figure out their living situation. Like I figured out mine when I was sleeping in my car and nobody in this family answered the phone. Silence. The kind that has weight. That's not fair, she whispered. No, I said. It wasn't. I hung up. The chili came out great. For a few months, things were almost quiet. Vanessa was living with her parents, and from what filtered back through Lorraine's guilt-laced updates, it wasn't going well. She was forced to work in their family business, some kind of commercial cleaning outfit, because Dan had cut off access to his bank accounts entirely. She'd already maxed out every credit card he'd previously given her. She griped constantly about having to work for her parents despite having a college degree, but honestly, they were probably the only ones who'd employ her. She had a criminal record now courtesy of the Christmas incident and a decade-long gap in her resume that screamed, I married someone and made extracting his resources my full-time career. I'd heard from Dan that her parents were severely disappointed in her as well, but that was just a rumor. They could be just as bad as her for all I know. Either way, the crap show of a divorce was grinding forward at the speed of bureaucracy, and I was content to watch from a distance. Then Dan started paying attention. He told me later. It was a Sunday morning. He had the boys for the weekend, his eldest, who was 7, and the baby, who was nearly 2. He was spooning oatmeal into the toddler's mouth when the morning light hit the kid's hair at a certain angle. Lighter than Dan's. Lighter than anyone's in our family. Curly in a way that didn't trace back to any branch of the family tree he could identify. He said the spoon just stopped midair. Dan was never the sharpest, but he wasn't stupid. Blinded, maybe. Vanessa had kept him in a fog for years, a carefully maintained atmosphere of guilt, obligation, and just enough affection to keep him compliant. But the fog was lifting, and what he saw underneath made his hands shake. He didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, he did something methodical and completely unlike the Dan I'd grown up with. He ordered a DNA test kit, then another from a different company because he wanted to be sure. He pulled phone records. He cross-referenced bank statements, cash withdrawals that didn't correspond to any household expense, hotel charges, in towns where neither of them had business. And the texts. God, the texts. Vanessa had been sloppy, or maybe she just never imagined Dan would look. Messages to a man Dan eventually identified as a smooth-talking regional sales rep in his early 40s. The kind of guy who wore too much cologne and called every woman gorgeous. The bronze-tongued lout, as I'd later come to think of him. He was nowhere near hot enough to be a trophy wife's secret lover, which somehow made it worse. Vanessa had risked everything, her marriage, her children's stability, her meal ticket, for times that asterisk. Both DNA tests came back the same. The baby wasn't Dan's. Dan drove to our parents' house on a Saturday afternoon. He walked in with a manila folder thick enough to choke on. Gerald was in his recliner. Lorraine was watering her African violets. He set the folder on the kitchen table, opened it, and said, I need you both to see this before I do what I'm about to do. Lorraine read the first page and sat down so hard she missed the chair. What happened next? The confrontation with Vanessa, the violence, the arrest, and the night she showed up at my door screaming that I destroyed her life. That's where everything detonated. And every second of it was caught on camera. Dan confronted Vanessa the following Tuesday. He did it at our parents' house, which in retrospect was either brave or insane. He'd called her under the pretense of discussing custody scheduling. She arrived 20 minutes late, wearing sunglasses indoors, already irritated that she'd had to drive across town. Dan was sitting at the kitchen table with the folder still open. Gerald stood near the doorway. Lorraine was in the kitchen gripping a dish towel like a rosary. From what Dan and Gerald both told me separately, unprompted matching in every detail, Vanessa's face went through about 6 expressions in 2 seconds when she saw the DNA results. Confusion, recognition, calculation, and then rage. She didn't deny it. That's the part that still gets me. She didn't even try. She went straight to justification. You were never enough, she said. You were never going to be enough. Then she lunged. She scratched Dan across the neck hard enough to draw blood. When Gerald stepped in to separate them, she caught him across the cheek. And when her eldest, 7 years old, standing in the hallway because nobody had thought to keep him away, started crying and grabbed at her leg, she shoved him so hard he hit the door frame and came away with a black eye that would take 2 weeks to fade. Lorraine called the police. For once in her life, she didn't hesitate. Vanessa was arrested in my parents' driveway, screaming that Dan had set her up, that the tests were fake, that this was all a conspiracy orchestrated by me, the brother-in-law she'd spent years dismissing as worthless. The officers were patient. The handcuffs were not. Her parents bailed her out within 6 hours. 4 hours after that, she was on my porch. I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner when the Ring doorbell lit up my phone. I saw her face in the fisheye lens, mascara-streaked hair, wild jaw, set in that particular way that meant she'd rehearsed whatever she was about to say, but would abandon the script within 10 seconds. I opened the door, but stayed behind the threshold. You did this, she said. Her voice was hoarse. You poisoned Dan against me. You poisoned this whole family against me because you couldn't stand that I had what you never... Vanessa, you need to leave. Never could keep. A family. A marriage. A life that actually meant something. And now you sit in this house that should have been times ours, times renting rooms to your loser friends while my children... Your children. Right. All of them yours. She shoved me, both hands flat against my chest. I stepped back but didn't fall. She came forward, finger jabbing, voice climbing octaves. You're nothing. You were nothing when you were homeless, and you're nothing now. This house doesn't change what you are. I said nothing. I just looked at the camera, then back at her. She followed my gaze. Saw the Ring doorbell. Saw the red recording light. She left. Peeled out of my driveway so fast she clipped my mailbox. I filed the police report the next morning. The restraining order came through by Thursday. Every frame of footage, the porch confrontation, the driveway departure, the mailbox assassination, went straight to Dan's divorce attorney. The divorce proceedings in our state are at fault. Vanessa's attorney tried to paint her as a devoted mother, driven to one mistake by emotional neglect. Dan's attorney played the footage. All of it. The Christmas party, the porch, the bank statements. The text with the bronze-tongued lout who was subpoenaed and showed up looking like a man who just realized the bill had arrived for a meal he'd eaten years ago. His testimony was hollow. He tried to minimize. It was casual, he said. She told me the marriage was over. The judge was unmoved. No alimony, partial custody, that Vanessa would barely exercise. She'd later cancel visits with increasing frequency, citing work, citing exhaustion. citing anything but the truth, which was that motherhood without an audience held no appeal to her. Dan got his name removed from the baby's birth certificate. The bronze-tongued loud who'd wanted the affair but emphatically not the consequences was saddled with child support obligations he lamented publicly on social media, which was exactly the caliber of man he'd always been. Vanessa ended up right back where she started working in her parents' cleaning business, living in their spare bedroom, posting cryptic quotes about loyalty on Instagram. Dan showed up at my house on a Friday night 3 days after the divorce was finalized. He was drunk. Not sloppy, just enough to make the drive over, which he shouldn't have done. He had scratches on his arms from moving furniture out of the apartment. Vanessa had trashed before surrendering the keys. I didn't invite him inside the house. I walked him to the camper in the backyard, poured 2 whiskeys, and shuffled a deck of Uno cards. We didn't talk for the first 20 minutes, just played. He drew 4. I stacked. He swore. Normal brother stuff, except we hadn't done normal brother stuff in 15 years. Then he said I should have answered the phone. I didn't look up from my cards. Yeah. When you were in your car. When you were, I knew. I knew, and I let Vanessa convince me it wasn't my problem. She didn't have to try very hard, Dan. His jaw worked. He set his cards down. No. She didn't. We finished the game. I won. He asked if he could sleep in the camper. I brought him a blanket and locked the house behind me. The next week I loaned him the camper. Not for him, for his eldest, who'd been sharing a bedroom with his father in that cramped apartment. A 7-year-old deserves his own space. I wasn't doing it for Dan. I was doing it for a kid who'd gotten a black eye from his own mother and still asked about her every day. Gerald and Lorraine showed up together on a Sunday. They'd seen the animated Reddit videos. Someone had turned the whole saga into a series, complete with cartoon versions of our family that were somehow both hilarious and devastating. Lorraine cried through most of the visit. Gerald sat rigid in my living room chair, hands on his knees, and said more words in one sitting than I'd heard from him in a decade. They'd started attending church. They'd enrolled in couples counseling. And for the first time in my life, I heard my father use the word narcissist, not about Vanessa, but about himself. We made you disposable, he said. We made you the one who could be lost. And when we almost lost you, we blamed you for falling. I didn't forgive them. Not that day. Maybe not ever fully. But I believed them, and that was new. They asked about family therapy. I declined. But I let them come to Sunday dinners. I let them watch me be an uncle present, steady, the kind of adult those kids had never had consistent access to. Dan's eldest started calling me Uncle Cam and showing me his drawings. The kid drew houses constantly. Big ones with lots of rooms. The house remained mine. Marcus and Theo still paid rent. The camera still recorded. The lock stayed changed. My family was not healed. We were not some redemption arc wrapped in a bow. But for the first time in 30-some years, we were honest. And honest, I was learning, was a foundation you could actually build on. Even if you had to pour it yourself.
I'm the girl who cheated. I know that's how he tells the story, and he's not wrong. It's the one fact that burns everything else to the ground. But it's not the whole story. It's just the ending he saw. The story I lived was something different. Before I met him, my life was like one of those perfect houses in a magazine. Everything was expensive, clean, and completely empty. There was no life in it. The people, the men I dated, they were all the same. They looked at me and saw my father's last name, the balance in my trust fund. They'd talk about mergers and acquisitions over dinner while I just pushed food around my plate, feeling invisible. My whole world was about appearances. Silent dinners where the clinking of silverware was the loudest sound. Grand gestures that meant nothing because they were just transactions. Love was something you bought, you proved you won. Then I met him. He worked at a small graphic design company my dad's firm hired for a tiny, unimportant project. He was wearing a faded band t-shirt and had paint under his fingernails. He didn't look at my purse to see if it was designer. He looked at my face when I talked. He laughed at my stupid jokes. He asked me about my dreams, not my portfolio. For the first time, someone actually saw times me times Vanessa, not the walking bank account. Our worlds should have never mixed. His life was loud and messy and real. He had roommates and late rent payments and friends who would drop everything to help you move a couch. My life was scheduled, sterile, and lonely. When I introduced him to my parents, my father shook his hand and then immediately asked him about his 5-year plan. He just smiled and said, "To be happy." My father didn't get it. I did. It was everything I ever wanted. For 5 years, we built a life together. We moved into a small apartment that he filled with warmth and laughter. Our friends merged his rowdy, loyal group and my polished, polite ones. It felt like a miracle. I was living in this beautiful dream, a normal life. And it terrified me every single day. I felt like an imposter, a spoiled girl playing dress-up. I kept waiting for him to wake up and realize I wasn't good enough. That I was just pretending to be this down-to-earth person when deep down I was one of them, one of the hollow people I ran away from. The better things got, the louder the voice in my head became. He'd look at me with so much love, so much trust, and the voice would whisper times, "You're going to break it. You don't deserve this. You're going to ruin him." Asterisk. Loving him felt like a 5-year-long panic attack. I was so afraid of losing the one real thing in my life that my fear started to poison it. I'd pick fights over nothing just to see if he'd leave. He never did. He was patient and kind, which only made me feel worse. It made me feel like an even bigger fraud. The night it happened is a sick blur. I was out with some of my old friends from college. They were all talking about their lives, which sounded like checklists. Engagement, wedding house, in the suburbs, kids. It was the exact life I'd run from, but they made it sound so certain, so secure. All I could think about was the gnawing uncertainty inside me. All I could hear was that voice screaming, "Times, he's going to leave you. You're not what he thinks you are. It's only a matter of time." Asterisk. I drank too much champagne, trying to make the voice shut up. It didn't work. It just made me feel more disconnected, like I was watching my life from outside my own body. A guy started talking to me at the bar. He was a carbon copy of every man I'd ever dated before. Slick hair, expensive watch, an easy, meaningless smile. He said all the empty things I was used to hearing. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't a temptation. It was familiar. It felt like slipping back into the role I knew how to play. The conversation meant nothing. He meant nothing. He was a ghost. But for a few minutes, talking to him felt like an escape from the crushing fear that I was about to lose everything I truly loved. It was a stupid, pathetic, and desperate act of self-destruction. It was me pressing the red button just to prove it was real. I was so convinced I was going to fail, so sure I was going to hurt him, that I did it myself first. It was the ultimate act of cowardice. I murdered my own happiness before anything else could. I woke up the next morning with a pit in my stomach so deep I thought I might actually be sick. The shame was a physical weight. He was in the kitchen making coffee, humming a song he liked. He smiled at me, and I felt like a monster. I swore to myself I would bury it. I would delete the memory, lock it away, and spend the rest of my life making it up to him being the person he deserved. It was a disgusting, selfish plan, but it was the only one I had. Then my phone buzzed on the nightstand. My heart stopped. It was a text from the guy from the bar. Something stupid. Last night was fun. We should do it again. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a memory anymore. It was evidence. It was proof of the crime I had committed against the only person I had ever truly loved. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the screen. I had to delete it. I had to erase it before it could ruin everything. I just had to hit delete, and this nightmare would be over. I fumbled with the phone, my thumb hovering over the trash icon. Just as I was about to press it, he walked into the bedroom holding a mug of coffee for me. He saw the look on my face. The pure, unfiltered panic. "You okay?" he asked, his smile fading. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't speak. I just stared at him, my heart pounding in my ears. He put the mug down and walked toward me, his brow furrowed with concern. He glanced down at my hands, at the phone gripped so tight my knuckles were white. Before I could hide it, before I could do anything, he gently took it from me. He didn't read it right away. For a second, he just held the phone, looking from it to me, his face full of confusion. He trusted me. The idea that there could be something bad on there probably didn't even cross his mind. He was just trying to figure out why I looked so terrified. Then his eyes dropped to the screen. I watched his face as he read the words. It was like watching a statue crack. First, nothing. He just went completely vacant, his expression wiped clean. All the warmth, all the love I was used to seeing there just vanished. The air in the room got cold and thin. He put the phone down on the nightstand, very gently, like it was a bomb. He didn't look at me. He just turned and walked out of the bedroom. That silence was the loudest sound I've ever heard. It was 1,000 times worse than screaming. I followed him into the living room, a pathetic weight escaping my lips. He was just standing by the window, looking out at the street, his back to me. "Who is he?" he asked. His voice was flat. "Dead." It meant nothing. I choked out the words, feeling like poison. It was a mistake. One stupid mistake. He finally turned around, and the look on his face broke me. It wasn't anger yet. It was something much deeper. It was a kind of disbelief, like I had just told him the sky was green. He looked at me like he'd never seen me before. "A mistake," he repeated, his voice quiet. "You made a choice, Vanessa. This was a choice." And then the yelling started. It wasn't just him, it was me. I was sobbing, begging, trying to explain the mess in my head, the fear, the self-sabotage, the voice that told me I was going to ruin everything. But it all just sounded like excuses. Pathetic, selfish excuses. He wasn't hearing my reasons. He was just hearing the truth. I had shattered his trust. I had taken the one pure good thing in my life and destroyed it for no reason at all. Our fight wasn't a performance for the neighbors, though I'm sure they heard every word. It was the sound of my soul literally tearing itself in two. The good part that loved him and the broken part that had just killed him. He said it was over. He said he couldn't even look at me. Then he walked back into the bedroom, packed a bag, and left. I collapsed on the floor, crying so hard I couldn't breathe. I thought that was the worst it could get. I was wrong. The next day I went to my parents' house, just desperate for somewhere to go. When I came back to the apartment that evening, it was half empty. His clothes were gone. His books were gone. The stupid, ugly painting he loved was gone from the wall. He had taken his entire life out of ours while I wasn't there. He had erased himself. That's when I made my choice. He chose to leave and I chose to fight. In the world I grew up in, you don't just let things go, you fix them. You prove your worth. If something is broken, you throw money and effort at it until it's whole again. I thought his silence was a test. He was hurting and he needed to see how much I loved him. He needed proof. So I started sending the gifts. First it was flowers to his office. A huge bouquet with a card that just said, "I'm sorry. I love you." Then I sent a first edition copy of his favorite book to his new place. I had to get the address from one of his friends. I wrote letters, pages and pages of them, pouring out everything I couldn't say during our fight. I explained the fear, my feelings of not being good enough, how my love for him was so big it scared me into doing the dumbest thing in the world. He never responded. The silence continued. So I tried harder. I thought he needs to see times me. He needs to know I won't just disappear, that I won't give up. I knew his routine. I knew which coffee shop he went to in the morning, which bar he and his friends went to on Fridays. I'd go with my friends and we'd just happen to be there. I'd try to catch his eye just to give him a small, sad smile to show him I was still here, still fighting for us. He would just turn and walk away. I wasn't stalking him. In my messed up head, I was making a grand gesture. I was trying to scream, "I love you," across the canyon of silence he had built between us. I asked my friends to talk to him, to tell him how devastated I was, to tell him that he was my whole world. They did, but it only made things worse. He told them to tell me to stop. But I couldn't. Giving up felt like admitting that he was right, that I didn't love him enough. Persistence was how I had been taught to show devotion. You don't take no for an answer. You wear them down with the sheer force of your love. I see now how crazy that sounds, but at the time it was the only logic I understood. I thought his anger was a wall I just had to be strong enough to break down. The final blow didn't come from him. It came from my mother. She called me one afternoon. Her tone was serious, the same one she used when a business deal went south. "Vanessa," she said, no warmth in her voice. "I spoke with his mother. You need to stop." My blood ran cold. "What? Why?" "You're hurting him," she said, and the words hit me like a physical slap. "This isn't helping. You're scaring him. All these things you're doing." The letters, the showing up, it's not love. It's harassment. You have to leave him alone. It's over. Hearing it from her, the woman who taught me that the solution to any problem was to be relentless, to take what you want, to never show weakness, it broke through all my delusions. She was the one who always told me to fight, and now she was telling me to surrender. I hung up the phone and just sat there in silence. And for the first time I saw myself through his eyes. The gifts weren't romantic. They were intrusions. The letters weren't apologies. They were demands for attention. My presence wasn't a reminder of my love. It was a threat. My grand gestures weren't a testament to my devotion. They were deeply, profoundly selfish. I wasn't the heartbroken girl fighting for the love of her life. I was the monster under his bed. I was the villain in his story. I finally understood. The silence he wanted wasn't a test for me to pass. It was his new reality. A reality he needed to build to protect himself from me. And I wasn't in it. I was never going to be in it again. Okay, I know what he's going to say about me. He's going to say I'm a cheater, that I did it before and I was planning to do it again. And he'll have his proof screenshots and bits of conversation that he's lined up to make me look like the worst person in the world. The truth is, I don't even know if I can argue with him. I just know that's not how it felt. It didn't feel like a plan to cheat. It felt like trying to breathe after being held underwater for a very, very long time. Let's get the big thing out of the way first. The mistake. The one I've been paying for every single day for the last 8 years. When my husband and I had been dating for just 4 months, I kissed another guy at a party. I was 22, I was drunk, and it was stupid. I told him the next day, crying my eyes out. He said he forgave me. I thought that meant we could move on. What I didn't realize is that his forgiveness came with a life sentence. He never forgot. He never let times me, times forget. It became the ghost in our marriage. Every time I wanted to go out with my friends, there was a hesitation in his voice. Every time a male coworker's name came up, his eyes would get a little bit colder. He never yelled or accused me directly, not after the first year or two. He did something worse. He just got quiet. The silence would fill the entire house, this heavy judging thing that made me feel like I was a criminal on parole. Our life together became a long, drawn-out punishment for something I did when we were practically kids. For a long time, I tried to be the perfect wife to make up for it. I'd text him constantly when I was out. I'd turn down invitations I knew would make him uncomfortable. I stopped having male friends. I slowly cut off pieces of myself to make him feel secure. The problem is, he never did. His insecurity was a black hole, and no matter how much of myself I threw into it, it was never enough. Our intimacy just died. It's hard to feel desired by a man who you know is also constantly watching you, waiting for you to mess up. We went from lovers to a warden and his prisoner living in the same house. At work, I'm a different person. I'm a project manager, and I'm good at it. People listen to me, they respect my opinion. I'm confident, and I get things done. I feel like times me, asterisk. But every day I'd walk through our front door, and that person would just disappear. I'd shrink down into the untrustworthy wife again, careful with my words, hiding my phone screen without even thinking about it, just out of habit. It was exhausting. Then Stan messaged me on Facebook a few weeks ago. I barely knew him from high school, but he was from my hometown, a place that felt a million miles away from the life I was living. He's a soldier, and his pictures were from all over the world. His life just seemed so big, purposeful. Our conversations were nothing scandalous. We talked about my job, his deployments, what happened to old friends. He told me I sounded like a rock star at my job, and it was the first compliment I'd gotten in years that wasn't followed by a suspicious glance. He was just a nice guy who saw me as a person, not as my husband's property. Talking to him was like opening a window in a stuffy, sealed room. Last week he mentioned he was going to be in my city for a couple of days to visit his brother. He said his sister Jessica and another girl we knew, Sam, were all going to try and get together for a drink. He asked if I wanted to join. It sounded so normal, so easy. A few hours of laughing and talking about old times, a small escape from the silence at home. I knew I had to tell my husband. If I tried to hide it, it would just prove his worst fears right when he inevitably found out. My whole life was about avoiding that suspicion. So, that night, I sat down and told him, trying to sound as casual as possible. Hey, some old friends from my hometown are getting together while one of them is in town. Stan, his sister Jessica, and another girl, Sam. I was thinking of going. I named every single person. Total transparency. I saw the change immediately. The slight tightening of his jaw, the way his eyes went flat. Okay, he said. I'll come with you. My heart just sank. It wasn't a sweet offer. It wasn't him wanting to meet my friends. It was a check-in. It was the warden wanting to accompany the prisoner on their brief trip to the yard. I could see the whole night playing out in my head. My husband sitting silently at a table in a loud bar, nursing one beer for 2 hours, radiating disapproval while I tried to make small talk. He hates staying out late and gets grumpy. He would make everyone uncomfortable until I felt so guilty that I'd suggest we leave early. He would turn my one night of freedom into another test of my loyalty, a test I could never truly pass. Oh, you don't have to do that, I said, trying to keep my voice light. It's just boring hometown gossip. You'd be miserable. Plus, you always go to bed early. He just shrugged. I don't mind. I was trapped. If I said yes, the night was ruined. If I said no, I was hiding something. So I just deflected. I probably won't even go. It's just an idea. I lied just to make the conversation stop. A couple of days later, Stan messaged me for my number to put together a group chat to coordinate. I was on the couch, laptop open, and my husband was in the kitchen just a few feet away. I typed back, "Sure, it's my number," and hit enter. I did it right out in the open. Part of me felt like I was daring him to say something, to see how open and honest I was being. But he didn't. He just continued making his stupid protein shake. In his mind, I knew the story was already written. My transparency didn't matter. Every innocent message was just another nail in my coffin. I closed the laptop, a wave of hopelessness washing over me. I went to bed that night feeling sick. I hadn't done anything wrong, not really, but I felt dirty. I felt the weight of his judgment even when he was asleep next to me, a quiet, rumbling anger that I knew was just waiting for a reason to explode. The next morning I woke up and he was already gone. That was weird. He never leaves for the gym without waking me up. I got out of bed, a knot forming in my stomach. I walked into the living room planning to make coffee and shake off the feeling of dread. And then I saw it. My laptop sitting on the coffee table where I'd left it. But it wasn't closed anymore. It was open. The screen was on. My blood ran cold. The messenger window was maximized, the conversation with Stan laid out like evidence at a trial. I didn't even have to look closely to know. He'd seen everything. My stomach twisted into a tight, painful knot. I felt a strange sense of déjà vu, like I was 22 again, about to confess something stupid and life-altering. Except this time I hadn't actually done anything. He walked back into the living room, then holding a mug of coffee, moving with a calm, deliberate slowness that was more terrifying than any shouting match. He didn't look at me at first. He just stood there looking at the laptop screen as if he were reading an interesting article. So he said, his voice completely flat. "Stan?" Just the name hanging in the air between us. "What about him?" I asked, but my voice came out as a weak croak. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were like chips of ice. "Don't play dumb with me, Ashley. I saw the messages, all of them. You're very pretty. You sound like a rock star. How you think his life is so intriguing. All of this while you were telling me not to come, that I'd be bored." I flinched. He was reading my private thoughts, my little escape, and painting it as a crime. "It's not what you think," I started the classic line that everyone says. "It was a group of friends getting together." "I told you that. I told you about his sister Jessica and Sam." "Oh, write the cover story," he sneered, finally letting a bit of anger show. "The friends you were so eager to see, but not eager enough for your own husband to join you. Funny how that works. You were trying to get rid of me so you could have your little date." The injustice of it all made a flash of heat rise in my chest. I wasn't trying to get rid of you. I was trying to have one single night to myself without you watching my every move. I knew you'd be miserable and grumpy, and you'd make it all about us. I just wanted a break, a few hours to feel like a normal person. A normal person who gives her number to another man while her husband is 10 feet away, he shot back. A normal person who is planning a secret meetup and lying about it. I wasn't lying, I was shouting now, my voice cracking. "I told you the names. I told you where I was going. How is that a secret?" He took a step closer, his face a mask of cold fury. He lowered his voice and every word was like a punch. "Because I know how this works, Ashley. I've seen this before. It starts with messages, then a harmless drink. Then what? You were going to cheat on me. Again?" There it was. The word. Asterisk. Again, asterisk. The fight just evaporated out of me. All the air left my lungs. I sank onto the edge of the couch, my whole body feeling heavy and tired. It didn't matter what I said. It didn't matter that this was different, that I was a 30-year-old woman and not a stupid 22-year-old girl. In his eyes, I would always be that girl. All the years of trying to be perfect, of walking on eggshells, of giving up parts of myself to earn back his trust, it all meant nothing. He had never trusted me again, not for a single day. He stood over me, waiting for me to deny it, to cry, to beg. I didn't have it in me. I just stared at the floor. The silence stretched on, and when he spoke again, his voice was different. It was cold and businesslike. All the fake emotion was gone. "I've been thinking about this for a while," he said calmly. "I've already looked into what happens next. with the house, with alimony. We need to be practical about this. I looked up at him, and for the first time I think I truly saw him. This wasn't a husband heartbroken by a potential betrayal. This was a man who had found his exit strategy. He hadn't been fighting for our marriage these last few miserable years. He'd been building his case. All the quiet treatments, the subtle monitoring, the suffocating suspicion, it wasn't a symptom of his pain. It was a tactic. He was waiting for me to make a mistake, any mistake, so he could pull the trigger and still be the good guy, the victim. He needed me to be the villain so he didn't have to be. The knot in my stomach didn't loosen, but it changed. The sick dread was replaced by a hollow, aching clarity. I had been trying to fix a marriage that he had already condemned. I was a prisoner on death row, trying to redecorate my cell. "Okay," I said. My voice was quiet, but it was steady. He seemed surprised. I think he was expecting a bigger scene. He wanted the drama, the tears. He wanted to see me fall apart so he could be sure he was right about me. I refused to give it to him. "Okay," he repeated, a little thrown off. "Okay," I said again, meeting his gaze. "If that's what you want." I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel like a cheater. I just felt an overwhelming wave of exhaustion, like I'd just finished a marathon I didn't even know I was running. For 8 years I had been carrying the weight of his insecurity, and he had just taken it off my shoulders. He thought he had uncovered my secret plan on my laptop screen. But what he'd really done was sign our divorce papers. He'd exposed the truth of our marriage. It hadn't been real for a very long time. It was a performance, and he had just ended the show. He stood there for another moment, seething with his hollow victory, and then he turned and walked into the bedroom. I heard drawers opening and closing. He was packing a bag. And as he did, the only thing I felt was a quiet, heartbreaking sense of relief. The warden had finally left his post. The silence in the house was no longer heavy and judging. It was just empty. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt like I could finally breathe. I was free. I'm the wife. The one who cheated. You've probably heard my husband's version, and I'm sure I sound like a monster. Maybe I am. But things are never as simple as one person being good and the other being bad. Our story started falling apart long before I ever sent that first text message. It started with the house. It was supposed to be our dream, the place where we'd raise our family and grow old. Instead, buying it nearly broke us. The stress was unbelievable, a constant grinding weight on both of us. We were fighting about money, about paint colors, about everything. The joy was just gone, replaced by this shared anxiety. I thought another baby would fix it. I remembered how happy we were after our daughter was born, how we felt like a team. I thought a second child would bring that feeling back, that purpose. When I brought it up, my husband looked at me like I'd asked him to climb a mountain. He said he had reservations. He talked about money and the stress of the new house. It was the first time I felt like my dream for our family was something I had to sell him on, like a timeshare. But I pushed, and eventually he agreed. The moment I saw that positive pregnancy test, I felt a rush of hope. But when I showed it to him, his smile didn't reach his eyes. It was there for a second, then it vanished, and he confessed he had this nagging dread he couldn't shake. That dread became a wall. He didn't build it brick by brick. He just built it overnight. he decided the only way to deal with his fear was to get a new, better-paying career. And just like that, he was gone. He enrolled in a bunch of online courses and locked himself in his study. He says we still had dinner together, and technically we did. But he wasn't there. He was a ghost at the table, staring through me, his mind on coding or project management or whatever it was he was studying. I tried to talk to him about my day, about our toddler, about the new baby kicking, and he'd just nod, give a one-word answer, and you could tell he was just waiting for me to stop talking so he could go back to his computer. I was dealing with a moody 2-year-old, a high-risk pregnancy that left me exhausted and sick, and a new house that still felt like a construction zone. I was drowning, and my husband was in the other room with noise-canceling headphones on. I have never ever felt so alone in my entire life. I tried to get his attention. I tried to feel like a person again. I'd take long baths, put on a nice dress, do my makeup. I was trying to feel like the woman he fell in love with, not just a tired pregnant mom. He either didn't notice at all or he'd get this suspicious look on his face. "Who are you getting dressed up for?" he'd ask, not like a compliment, but like an accusation. I wasn't just losing my husband. I was disappearing. Then someone at work saw me. He's older, married, and a manager in another department. It started so innocently. He just listened. He'd ask how my weekend was and actually stick around to hear the answer. He noticed when I got a haircut. He told me my new maternity dress looked nice on me. It was like getting a drink of water after walking through a desert for months. I didn't realize how thirsty I was for a little bit of attention, for someone to just see me as a human being. It started with friendly chats, then we started texting. Stupid things at first, jokes and complaints about work. But his texts made my heart beat faster. They were a bright spot in my gray, lonely days. It felt good to have a secret, something that was just for me. For the first time in so long, I felt interesting and alive. I know what you're thinking. And yes, it went further. A lot further. Was it wrong? Of course it was. It was a terrible, reckless thing to do. It was an escape. It was a fantasy where I was the main character, where I was wanted and exciting. My husband was upstairs studying for a future I felt no part of, and I was downstairs on my phone building a temporary world where I wasn't just a household appliance. The other man would give me little assignments, things like, "Wear the green dress tomorrow," or "Tell me about your first kiss." It sounds weird, I know, but it was a game. And it was intoxicating because it was all about me. For a few hours, I wasn't a neglected wife or a vessel for a baby my husband seemed to resent. The first time we met at a hotel, I was so nervous I almost threw up. But in that room, I wasn't a mom. I wasn't pregnant. I was just a woman being desired. It was a fantasy, but it was the only thing that was keeping me from completely breaking down. The fantasy came crashing down when my husband found the messages on my social media. The look on his face. I will never forget it. He was broken and I had broken him. He kept asking why. Why? But how could I explain it? How could I say, because you checked out? Because you made me feel invisible. Because your dread for our new baby made me feel like I was a burden. It would have just sounded like excuses. It would have sounded like I was blaming him. So I gave him the simple answers. I told him it was the pregnancy hormones, that I was stupid, that it was a mistake and it meant nothing. It was easier than trying to explain the slow, quiet death of our marriage. I promised to end it. And I meant it. I really, truly wanted to fix my family. I cut off all contact with my coworker. I focused on my husband. For a few weeks we tried. He came out of his study. We went on dates. We took our daughter to the park. It was like we were acting out a play of what a happy family looked like. But it felt so fragile, like one wrong word would shatter everything. But the affair wasn't just physical. It was an emotional habit, a crutch I had relied on for months. I felt like I couldn't just ghost him and move on. I needed to see him one last time, to say a real goodbye, to close that chapter completely, so I could truly focus on my marriage. I needed closure. I know how that sounds, but it felt true to me. It felt necessary. I knew my husband wouldn't understand. His trust in me was a threat, and asking to go see the man I cheated on him with would snap it instantly. So I lied. I told him I had a one-night business trip for work, a last-minute training seminar an hour away. It was a stupid, panicked decision. As I packed an overnight bag, my hands were shaking. I felt sick with guilt, but I told myself it was for the greater good. One last lie to end all the lies. After this, I could finally be the wife and mother my family deserved. I just had to get through this one night. I drove to the hotel, met him, and ended it for good. The whole drive home, I rehearsed what I would say to my husband, how our new life would start tomorrow. I felt a strange sense of relief. It was over. I had done it. I pulled into our driveway, took a deep breath, and walked inside. The house was quiet. He was sitting on the couch in the living room, with all the lights off except for the glow of his phone screen. He didn't look up when I came in. The air was cold and heavy, and in that moment I just knew something was terribly wrong. "How was the trip?" he asked, without looking up from his phone. His voice was completely flat. It was the kind of quiet that's louder than screaming. All the relief I had felt on the drive home evaporated. "It was fine," I said, my voice sounding shaky even to my own ears. Long, tiring. I started taking things out of my overnight bag, trying to act normal, trying to pretend the air in the room wasn't thick enough to choke on. "Good seminar?" he asked. The question just hung there. He still hadn't looked at me. "Yeah, you know, corporate stuff." I was rambling. My heart was pounding in my chest. He knew. I didn't know how, but he knew. He finally looked up from his phone, and his eyes were hollow. There was no anger in them yet, just a chilling emptiness. "That's funny," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Because your work doesn't have a seminar scheduled for tonight." I called them. My blood ran cold. Of course he had. He had been stewing here all night, checking, verifying, building his case against me. My lie was so thin, so stupid. "And that's also funny," he continued, standing up and walking towards me, "because location sharing is still on." He turned his phone around so I could see the screen. It was a map. A map with a neat, tidy blue line showing my car's journey from our house to a hotel downtown and then back home. Not to the conference center, an hour away where I had claimed to be. The floor felt like it dropped out from under me. I had nothing. No more lies, no more excuses. I was ending it, I whispered the words, feeling pathetic and small. I swear. I went there to tell him it was over for good. I needed to do it in person. I needed closure so I could come home to you and be done with it all. He laughed. It was a horrible, bitter sound that had no humor in it. Closure. You lied to my face. Packed an overnight bag and went to a hotel with the man you cheated on me with, and you call it closure. He was shouting. Now the emptiness in his eyes replaced by a firestorm of rage and pain. You think I'm that stupid? You think I'm that much of a fool? It's the truth, I cried, tears streaming down my face. I know how it looks, but I am telling you the truth. It's over. I ended it tonight. He stared at me, his chest heaving. He looked like he was searching for a single reason to believe me, but couldn't find one. Then a new, cruel kind of calm settled over him. Okay, he said. Okay. If it's really over, you won't mind proving it. He pointed to my phone, which I had set on the kitchen counter. Pick it up. Text him right now. Tell him your husband knows everything and that you can never speak to him again. Let's see what he says. I froze. It felt like a trap. A test I was designed to fail. This wasn't about truth. It was about power. He wanted to watch me, to control the narrative, to humiliate me. He wanted to see me perform my repentance for him. My affair was born out of feeling invisible and powerless. And here he was in the most critical moment trying to make me his puppet. No, I said, my voice barely audible. What, he snarled. Why not? If it's over, what's the problem? Because this isn't about us fixing things, I said, a new kind of strength, a desperate, cornered animal strength rising in me. This is about you punishing me. This is a game and I won't play. So you're protecting him, he spat, the accusation dripping with venom. After everything, you're still protecting him. He lunged for my phone, but I was faster. I snatched it off the counter and held it to my chest. It was a reflex. It wasn't about the other man. It wasn't even about the messages. It was about saying, you don't get to control this. You don't get to control me. It was the last piece of myself I had left, this one final act of defiance, and I clung to it. His face crumbled. Seeing me clutch the phone like a lifeline was his answer. To him it was a confession. It was proof that I was still in it, that I had chosen the affair over him, over our family. The hope I had seen flickering in his eyes just moments before died completely. He looked at me as if I was a complete stranger, a monster who had taken his wife's place. The silence that followed was worse than the shouting. It was the sound of our marriage taking its last breath. He just shook his head slowly, a single tear rolling down his cheek. He didn't say another word to me. He walked past me, went upstairs, and I heard the drawers of our dresser opening and closing. A few minutes later, he came down with a duffel bag. He walked to the front door without a glance in my direction, opened it, and left. The click of the lock echoed in the silent house. I stood there in the kitchen for I don't know how long, phone still clutched in my hand until my legs gave out, and I slid down to the floor. It was over. My stupid, desperate attempt to get the closure I thought I needed had destroyed the one thing I was trying to save. I had lied to end the lie. And in doing so, I had burned the whole world down. He thinks he caught me cheating a second time. That's the story he'll tell everyone, and that's what they'll all believe. They'll see my refusal to give him my phone as the ultimate proof of my guilt. But the truth is, he had already decided I was guilty. The phone wasn't a tool for finding the truth. It was a weapon to confirm his worst fears. He didn't want reconciliation. He wanted a confession. He wanted to win. He never once asked me why I was so lonely I would look for comfort in another man's arms. He never asked what it felt like to manage a toddler, a house, and a high-risk pregnancy while he hid in his study building a future I wasn't sure I was part of. He only ever asked, "Why would you do this to me? It was never about us. It was about him." Snatching that phone was the last selfish thing I did. But it was also the first thing I did for myself in a long time. I refused to let my messy, complicated, painful story be reduced to a text message in his cruel little test. He thinks he caught a cheater. All he really did was prove he never saw me at all. And now he never will again. I'm sure my ex-husband has told you all about me. I'm the monster, the cheating wife who blew up our perfect life for no reason. He probably told you how he gave me everything, how he worked so hard to build us a home, and how I threw it all away for a cheap thrill. He's good at telling that story. He's had a lot of practice. But he always leaves out the part where I disappeared long before I ever got in that car. We met when I was 19. He was almost 30, a man with a 5-year plan and a retirement portfolio. I was a kid working at a coffee shop with no plan other than what I was doing that weekend. He swept me off my feet. He was so sure about everything, and I thought that meant he was sure about me. I was wrong. He was sure about his plan, and I was just a piece he'd slotted into it. I wasn't a partner. I was the wife accessory. He bought a beautiful house in a nice neighborhood. He called it our house, but it was his. His office was the center of it. His rules were the law. I tried to make it a home. I'd pick out new curtains and he'd say they were fine without looking up from his laptop. I'd cook his favorite dinner and he'd eat while answering work emails. I was just background noise. My job was to keep the house running so he could focus on his important life as the breadwinner. He didn't see me. He saw a dependent. He'd hand me his credit card and tell me to buy something nice, like I was a child he needed to placate with a toy. The loneliness was a physical weight. I felt like I was suffocating in silence. For months I begged him to go to marriage counseling. I tried to tell him how I felt invisible, lost, more like his daughter than his wife. He'd just pat my hand and say, "We don't need to pay someone to listen to our problems. We're fine. You're just stressed." He wasn't listening. He was dismissing me. My only escape was my co-ed soccer team. He hated it. He thought I just went to get drunk with a bunch of guys. He wasn't entirely wrong about the drinking a few beers helped me forget that I was going home to a man who shared a bed with me but not a life. But it wasn't about the beer. It was about feeling like a person. On the field, I was part of a team. After the game at the bar, people talked times me. My teammate Buddy would ask how my day was and actually listen to the answer. They'd laugh at my dumb jokes. For 2 hours on a Wednesday night, I wasn't just my husband's wife. I was just me. And it felt incredible. The night it all fell apart was just another Wednesday. We had a game, and afterward the team was going to a party at someone's house. I was excited. It was something to look forward to. When I told my husband, his face went cold. He told me I couldn't go. "Not, I wish you wouldn't, but..." "You're not going." He said he wanted to spend the evening with me, that he'd had a long week. It sounded sweet on the surface, but the tone wasn't one of a partner asking for my time. It was a father grounding his kid. Something inside me just broke. All the resentment, all the times I'd felt unheard and controlled, it all just boiled over. So when Buddy dropped me off after the game and asked if I was sure I didn't want to go to the party, I just got back in his car. It wasn't about Buddy. It wasn't even about the party. It was a desperate, stupid, self-destructive way of screaming, "You don't own me!" I drank way too much, way too fast. I was chasing a feeling. I wanted to feel wanted. I wanted to feel time seen asterisk. And I was. The attention was like a drug. People were looking at me, laughing with me touching my arm when I spoke. For a few hours I was the main character. It was messy and ugly. I had sex with Buddy. I slept with another guy on the team too. It was a blur of terrible decisions, one crashing into the next. It was a horrible way to feel alive, but it was the only way I could remember how. The next morning, the shame hit me like a physical blow. I crept downstairs, my head pounding, my stomach churning with guilt and cheap beer. He was already up sitting at the kitchen table with a coffee, staring at the wall. His eyes were like ice. He didn't yell. He just said, "Tell me what happened last night." How could I? How could I explain that I set our whole life on fire just because I felt small? I couldn't form the words. So I lied. I told him I went to the party, had too much to drink, and crashed on a couch. A sanitized, pathetic half-truth. He just stared at me for a long moment. Then he pushed his iPad across the table. Try again. My messages were open, my location history. Photos from the night before that someone had texted me. He had seen everything. My stomach dropped out. It wasn't just the cheating. It was the fact that he'd been watching me. The first words out of my mouth weren't, "I'm sorry." They were a pathetic, terrified whisper, "Are you leaving me?" My whole identity was so wrapped up in him that my first instinct was fear of being abandoned, not remorse for what I'd done. That's when I broke down completely. I told him everything, every single ugly detail. I cried until I couldn't breathe. I promised I'd do anything. I'd go to AA. I'd quit the team. I immediately found a marriage counselor, the one I'd been begging him to see for a year, and booked an appointment. I was ready to crawl through glass to fix what I had broken. We started going to therapy. I was trying, I really was. But he was a ghost. He was there, but he was gone. He'd sit next to me on the couch, but he wouldn't touch me. He slept in the guest room. The silence in the house was worse than it had ever been. I felt like I was poison. The only person who would even talk to me like I was still human was Buddy. He'd text to check on me. We'd meet for coffee. It was wrong, and I knew it was wrong, but he was a lifeline in an ocean of loneliness. It was a sick, pathetic comfort reaching for the person who helped me ruin everything, but I felt so completely alone. Then one night, after a terrible silent dinner, my husband came to me. He said he'd been thinking. He said maybe the reason we couldn't move forward was because there was too much baggage. He had a plan. He said we should get a divorce, a clean, simple, uncontested one, so we could wipe the slate clean. He painted this picture of us starting over, dating each other again, rebuilding from scratch without the weight of the past. He said it was the only way to save us. Looking at him, seeing a flicker of hope in his eyes, for the first time in weeks I actually believed him. I thought this was our chance. I told him I'd do whatever it took. He was so convincing. He laid out this whole roadmap for our healing, and I clung to it like a life raft. I was so desperate to believe that the man I married was still in there somewhere, buried under all the hurt. So I played my part. I became the most cooperative future ex-wife you've ever seen. I helped him get the paperwork together. When he said it would be faster and cheaper if we didn't use lawyers, I agreed without a second thought. Why would we need them? We were on the same team after all. I packed up my clothes and personal things, moving them into a storage unit he helped me rent. He told me it was a temporary step, a way to make the separation feel real, so our reunion would be even sweeter. Each box I taped up felt like a step toward fixing us. I spent days methodically taking myself out of the house we were supposed to share, smiling through my tears because I thought I was earning my way back to him. I was a ghost in my own home, tidying up the evidence of my existence, all while he watched with what I thought was sadness, but now I know was just patience. The day we signed the papers, he held my hand. He told me he was proud of me, that this was the hardest part, and that soon we could start building us again. I signed on every dotted line he pointed to. I waived my right to spousal support because he said it would just complicate things, and we didn't need that. We needed a clean break to get our clean start. I believed every single word. I was so blinded by the hope he was selling me that I couldn't see the truth right in front of my face. The divorce was finalized in a few weeks. It was all so clean, so efficient. I remember calling him that night, my voice shaking with a mix of fear and excitement. "So, it's done," I said. "When do we start over? When is our first date?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. It was a different kind of silence than the one I had grown used to. This one was heavy, final. "We're not," he said. His voice was flat, empty of all the warmth he'd been faking for the past month. I couldn't process it. What are you talking about?" This was the plan. "Your plan." "No," he said, and I could almost hear the smirk in his voice. "This was always the plan. My plan." And then he dropped the other shoe. "Did you really think I didn't know you were still seeing Buddy? That you were still texting him, meeting him for coffee?" My blood ran cold. He sent me a screenshot. A text from me to Buddy from just the week before, asking if he wanted to meet up. He had more. He'd been tracking me the whole time, gathering a second round of evidence. All that time I thought I was working to fix our marriage, he was just building a better case against me. He spelled it out for me slowly, like he was talking to a child. The "let's start over" story was a lie. He knew that if he just divorced me outright, it could get messy. I might fight for the house for alimony. I was the cheated on, neglected wife before I became the cheating wife. A good lawyer might have been able to argue that. But by getting me to continue my affair with Buddy, times after times I'd been caught while we were supposedly reconciling, he had what he needed. He had proof that I was unremorseful. "I needed you to be cooperative," he explained, his voice devoid of any emotion. "I needed you to sign the papers without a fight. And you did. You signed away everything. If you try to fight this now, I'll bring all of this to a judge. They won't see a heartbroken wife who made a mistake. They'll see a serial cheater who was sleeping with her affair partner while in marriage counseling. You won't get a dime." The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I hadn't just been divorced. I had been dismantled. He hadn't been a heartbroken husband. He had been a strategist. He used my hope, my guilt, and my desperation against me. Every tear he shed, every promise he made was a calculated move in his game. I was a problem to be managed, and he had managed it perfectly, ensuring he got a clean, cheap exit with no obligations. I was just a pawn he sacrificed to win. The weeks after that phone call are a blur. I was left with a car, a storage unit full of stuff, and an empty bank account. He had already removed me from everything. I had nothing. The shame was suffocating. It wasn't just about the cheating anymore. It was about being a fool. He had played me so completely, and I had let him because I was so desperate to be forgiven. But he was long gone, of course. He was a symptom of a sickness, not a cure, and once the marriage was officially dead, there was no reason for him to stick around. I was truly alone for the first time in my life. I got a cheap apartment and a waitressing job. Some nights I would just sit on the floor and cry, not for the man I lost, but for the girl who was so lost she let a man define her entire existence. A few months later, just for something to do, I started talking to people online. Not dating, just talking. I met a man from Tennessee. He was kind. He was a truck driver, and he would call me from the road. He didn't have a 5-year plan or a stock portfolio. He just had stories about the road and a laugh that made me feel warm. He asked me questions about my day and actually listened to the answers. He didn't see me as a project or a broken thing to be fixed. He just saw me. After a few months, he asked me to come visit him. I packed a single suitcase and drove the 9 hours to his small town in Tennessee. I never left. We got married 6 months later at the courthouse. It wasn't a big production. It was just us. It was real. I'm pregnant now. And when I feel the baby kick, I'm not scared. For the first time, I feel like I'm building a life, not just living in someone else's. My ex-husband took my house, my money, and my dignity. He thinks he won. But he left me with one thing myself. And I'm finally learning who that is. He can tell his story and paint me as the villain. But what he did, the cold and calculated way he manipulated my heart to get what he wanted, that was a different kind of evil. I set our life on fire in a moment of desperate, drunken madness. He quietly and patiently burned mine to the ground so he could walk away without any smoke on his clothes. I guess I'm the bad guy now. My wife would tell you I'm a monster, a liar who threw away in one 8-year marriage for someone else. She's not wrong about the liar part, but she's got the timeline all mixed up. Our marriage didn't die this week. It died 18 years ago. I'm just the one who finally had to bury it. We were 20 years old when it happened. 20. I was so stupid in love I couldn't see straight. She was everything to me. My first real love, the person I was building my entire future around. We had our first kid and another was on the way. Then the bomb dropped. It wasn't just a one-night mistake. She had been sleeping with her ex-boyfriend for 1.5 years. 1.5 years. Say that out loud. 18 months. For 1.5 years, she would kiss me goodnight, tell me she loved me, and then go meet him. For 1.5 years, she looked me in the eye and lied. And when that ended, there was another guy, an online thing. The trust wasn't just broken. It was ground into dust and scattered. It never came back. She tells everyone I forgave her. That's a nice, clean word for a very messy thing. I didn't forgive her. Forgiveness is for people who still have a partnership. I made a business decision. We had kids. I wasn't going to tear their world apart because of her. So I made her sign an agreement. It laid out exactly what would happen if we divorced. She would get less, I would get more. It wasn't about the money. I never wanted the money. It was a leash. It was a physical document that said, "You broke this. You don't get to pretend it's whole again." From that day on, our marriage was an arrangement. She just didn't want to admit it. She thinks we had an awesome marriage for the next decade. What we had was my Oscar-winning performance. I played the part of the perfect husband. I got her into rehab and helped her stay clean. I encouraged her hobbies, bought her art supplies, told her how talented she was. I planned the family vacations, I remembered the anniversaries, I did all the things a good husband is supposed to do. It was easier to play the part than to face the cold, empty space where my love used to be. I was building a beautiful house for our kids, but the foundation was rotten to the core. They deserved a stable home, and I was going to give it to them, even if it cost me my own soul. Then she got sick. About 7 years ago, uterine cancer. The day the doctor told us, she looked at me and saw tears in my eyes. She thought they were for her. She thought, he really loves me. He's scared of losing me. I was crying, but not for her. I was crying for me. I saw my prison sentence just get extended for life. The weight of my duty of this role I was playing was about to double. The escape I dreamed of was now impossible. How can you leave a sick wife? You can't. You become a saint or a monster, and I chose to play the saint. For 6 months I took care of her. I changed her dressings, I cooked her meals, I drove her to every appointment. I held her when she was weak and told her everything would be okay. Every single day was a new kind of hell. I'd bring her a bowl of soup with a smile on my face while screaming on the inside. She wasn't my wife anymore. She was my patient, my responsibility. Every kind word I said, every gentle touch felt like another nail hammering my own coffin shut. I met Sarah at work a few years after that. It wasn't planned. I wasn't looking for an affair, I was just looking for a person. We started talking during coffee breaks. Simple stuff. Work movies, complaining about the boss. And she laughed at my stupid jokes. She actually listened when I spoke. For the first time in more than 10 years, a woman looked at times me, times not at the character I was playing. I wasn't the husband or the dad. I was just a man. And I felt seen. The secret Facebook account wasn't about being sneaky. It was the only place on earth I could take the mask off. It was the only place I could be myself. We would message for hours. It wasn't just sexting and dirty pictures, though there was some of that. It was talking. It was real conversation with someone who didn't come with 18 years of baggage and betrayal. One night I told her everything. About my wife's affairs, about the agreement, about the cancer and feeling trapped. It wasn't gossip. It was like lancing a boil that had been poisoning me for my entire adult life. I told her that being with my wife felt like a chore, something I had to do to keep the peace in the house. With Sarah, it felt like breathing again after holding my breath for 15 years. We've been doing this for 3 years now. We just had our little anniversary. A bottle of cheap wine in a motel room, but it felt more real than any of the expensive anniversary dinners I'd ever had with my wife. We talked about the future. course we did. The idea of a life with her, a real one, after my kids are grown and out of the house, that's the only thing that gets me through the day. It's my light at the end of the tunnel. It's the life I thought I was going to have before my wife burned it all down. Last night I got home late. I was tired, but Sarah and I were messaging back and forth. Just little things, goodnight texts. I put my phone on the nightstand, plugged it in, and rolled over. My wife was already asleep, a soft, even rhythm to her breathing. I kissed her on the forehead, a habit nothing more, and closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I felt a little bit of peace. I fell asleep, dreaming of a future that finally felt possible, completely unaware of the storm that was about to break. The next morning, the peace was gone. The air in the room was thick and heavy, like right before a thunderstorm. I opened my eyes, and she was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with her back to me. Her shoulders were shaking just slightly. I knew. I didn't know how I knew, but the lie detector that's been wired into my gut for 18 years was screaming. I did what I always do. I played my part. I sat up, reached over, and put my hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" She flinched, pulling away from my touch like I had burned her. She didn't turn around. "Just a bad night's sleep," she mumbled. It was a lie, and we both knew it. After so many years of pretending what was one more morning, I got up, got ready for work, and kissed her on the forehead before I left. It was like kissing a marble statue. Cold, hard, and empty. The whole drive to work, my stomach was in knots. I knew the show was coming to an end. I just didn't know when the curtain would fall. It fell at 3:15 p.m. My phone buzzed on my desk. It wasn't a text. It was a string of screenshots. My conversations with Sarah. Dozens of them. The I love yous, the plans for our future, the things I'd said about my marriage. Underneath them, a single message from my wife: "Get home, now." The drive home was the calmest I've felt in my entire life. It was terrifying. There was no panic, no frantic rush to come up with an excuse. The time for excuses was over. The performance was done. All I could think was, "Times, it's finally over." Asterisk. I walked in the door and she was standing in the living room, my phone clutched in her hand like a weapon. Her face was a mess of tear tracks and raw anger. The beautiful house I'd worked so hard to maintain for our kids suddenly felt like a stage, and the final scene was about to play out. "Who is she?" she whispered, her voice cracking. I didn't lie. What was the point? Her name is Sarah. We used to work together. That's when the dam broke. The whispering turned to screaming. She threw my phone at the wall, where it shattered and fell to the floor in pieces. She called me a monster, a liar, a sociopath. She screamed about the last 18 years, about our perfect life, about how I could do this to her after everything she'd been through, after she'd fought cancer. I just stood there and took it. I let her scream until she was hoarse. When she finally ran out of breath sobbing, she looked at me and said the one thing that I knew was coming. "I thought you were my soulmate. I thought we had the perfect marriage." And that's when I finally spoke. Asterisk, "You times thought we had the perfect marriage," I said, my voice low and flat. "I had a full-time job playing the part of your husband." Her face changed from anger to confusion. "What are you talking about? We were happy." "No," I said. Asterisk, "You times were happy. I was doing my duty. Our marriage ended 18 years ago, the day I found out you'd been screwing your ex for a year and a half. Everything since then has been for the kids. A business arrangement. The color drained from her face. She looked at me like she was seeing a stranger for the first time. I mentioned the agreement, the papers I made her sign all those years ago. That wasn't forgiveness, I told her. That was a contract. Those were my terms for staying and raising my children in a stable home. You broke the marriage. I've just been managing the fallout. She thinks her world shattered today. She doesn't get it. My world shattered when I was 20. She's just finally seeing the rubble that I've been living in for almost 2 decades. Her pain is real, I see that. But it's the echo of the pain she put me through. She's mourning the loss of a man who never really existed. The happy, loving husband she remembers was a ghost. A character I put on every morning and took off every night when I was alone. The last few weeks have been hell on earth. We're living in the same house, but it's a cold war of slammed doors and whispered angry conversations when the kids are out. She cries constantly. She begs. She asks me what she can do to fix it. How do you explain to someone that you can't fix something that has been dead for 18 years? She's terrified of being alone, but I've been alone in this marriage since the beginning. I told Sarah everything, of course. I called her the night it all blew up. She was scared, but she was steady. She asked me what I was going to do. And for the first time, I had an honest answer. I'm getting a divorce. My wife has brought up counseling. She wants to try to rebuild. Rebuild what? A lie. I told her no. I told her to get a lawyer. She screamed that I was being cold, that I was just trying to take everything from her. She doesn't understand that I don't want anything except my freedom. The money, the house, it's all just stuff. I'd live in a cardboard box if it meant I could wake up in the morning and not have to put on a mask. I know how this looks. I'm the bad guy. I'm the cheater who left his wife who survived cancer. That will be the story everyone hears, and I guess I have to live with that. But the truth is so much messier. The guilt is there. It's a heavy weight, especially when I see the confusion in my kids' faces. I've hurt them, and that's a pain I'll have to carry forever. I blew up their world to save my own. But underneath the guilt, underneath the anger and the sadness, there's something else. It's a feeling I haven't had since I was a kid. For the first time since I found out about her first affair, I can breathe. The performance is over. The curtain is fallen. And I'm finally terrifyingly free. I need to be clear about something from the start. I'm not one person. There are 2 of me, and they've been fighting my whole life. There's the guy my wife married. He saw her from across a room when we were 19 and just knew she was it. She was light. She was everything good and normal and whole that I wasn't. That guy wanted a family, a house, a normal job. He wanted to feel connected to something, maybe even God. He wanted to be the man she deserved. Then there's the other one. The one that got made when I was 4 years old and my world fell apart. The one who learned that people who love you eventually leave you. He's the one who is always waiting for the other shoe to drop, the one who knows deep down that I'm fundamentally broken. He can't be fixed. All he knows is how to find an escape hatch. For years, my wife, let's call her Anna, was my anchor. She was so strong, so sure of herself. She made me believe I could be the good man. In the beginning, we were a team. We'd work our crappy part-time jobs, come home and get high together. We'd just sit in a comfortable fog and let the world go by. It was our escape and we did it together. But then she grew up. She quit smoking, got serious about her degree, and started talking about the future. I was so proud of her, I really was. But she left me alone in that fog. She didn't get that for me. It wasn't just a habit. It was medicine. It was the only thing that kept the broken man quiet. I started to feel that old chill again, the feeling of being left behind. I met the other woman at a dead-end warehouse job I took to pay for our engagement ring. It wasn't love. It wasn't even a spark. It was recognition. She was like me. A little lost, a little broken. She smoked. She didn't ask for my life story. She was a place. A container where I could put all the dark, ugly parts of myself so they wouldn't spill over and touch Anna. Proposing to Anna was the most real thing I've ever done. It was a promise I made to the good man inside me. I was going to build her the life she deserved, and in doing it, maybe I could finally become whole. But the pressure was suffocating. Every day I had to pretend to be this complete person, this man worthy of her love. It was exhausting. The broken man was screaming for an escape. 2 months after we set our wedding date, I let him out. I called the woman from work. For 5 years I lived 2 lives. Anna was my home. She was my light, my future, my dream made real. The other woman was my shadow. It never felt real with her. It was a transaction. I wasn't giving her love. I was dumping my self-hatred on her so I wouldn't bring it home to my wife. I told myself I was protecting Anna. This was better than the alternatives that sometimes flickered in my head, random hookups disappearing for days, worse things. The dark thoughts get quieter when you give them a room to live in. Then Anna and I decided to have a baby. It was a joint decision, something we both wanted more than anything. This was it, I thought. This would be the final piece. A child would fuse me together, make me one person. It would burn away the broken parts for good. But one night, I messed up. I was stupid with the other woman, didn't use protection. The second it was over, a cold chemical panic flooded my veins. This was the ultimate contamination. My shadow world was about to leak into my real world and poison everything. I imagined this tiny invisible sickness traveling from that empty apartment back to my home, to my wife, to the family we were trying to build. I couldn't let that happen. When I got home, Anna mentioned she was out of her prenatal vitamins. I went to the medicine cabinet, my hands shaking. I saw an old antibiotic prescription of mine. In that moment of pure terror, it seemed like the only answer. I gave her one and told her it was a vitamin. It wasn't about deceiving her. It was a sick, desperate attempt at quarantine. I was trying to stop the infection from reaching the only pure thing in my life. A few months later, she found out. About everything. I don't know how, but she did. The look on her face when she confronted me, it wasn't just anger. It was like I had reached inside her and snuffed out a light. The trusting, innocent part of her died that day, and I was the one who killed her. We spent a year in hell. We went to couples counseling. I started individual therapy. I tried to explain the fracture in my soul, the 2 men at war inside me. I don't think she ever really understood. How could she? She's whole. But we tried. I swore it was over, and for that year it was. I was the good man every single day. And slowly things got better. We started to heal. Last January, we decided we were ready. We were strong enough. We agreed to start trying for our baby again. I was so happy I cried. This was my second chance. My real chance to become the man I was supposed to be. But the second we made that decision, the pressure came back 10 times worse than before. This wasn't just about being a good husband anymore. This was about being a father. A times good times father. The thought of my brokenness touching a child, my child, was a weight I couldn't bear. The broken man inside me panicked. He didn't think, he didn't choose, he just ran. He ran back to the only escape he's ever known. It was a reflex, like a bone that never set right, breaking again in the exact same place. I was more careful this time. I used a credit card she didn't know about. I was meticulous. But I could feel myself starting to unravel. Living the lie again, but with a baby on the line, was eating me alive. I started losing track of things. Small details. I was constantly on edge, waiting for the floor to drop out. Tonight I was at my desk trying to finish up some work when my phone buzzed. It was a missed call from my office landline. Strange. Then another buzz. A missed call from Anna. My heart started hammering against my ribs. A second later, a text message from her popped up on the screen. It just said, "I called your work. They told me you took the day off." My blood went cold. For a few seconds I couldn't move. I just stared at the words on my phone screen, feeling the floor dissolve beneath me. The careful walls I'd built between my two lives didn't just crack. They were gone. Vaporized. She hadn't just found a clue. She'd found the whole map. The drive home was the longest 20 minutes of my life. I don't remember the traffic or the turns. I just remember the feeling of being hollowed out, a desperate, buzzing panic where my thoughts should have been. What could I even say? The lies were all used up. The excuses were pathetic. This wasn't like last time. This was a demolition. When I walked through the door, the house was silent. Anna was sitting at the kitchen table. She didn't look up right away. In front of her was a printout of a credit card statement with neat, angry circles in red ink around hotel charges and restaurant bills in towns I had no business being in. She finally raised her head. There were no tears. Her eyes were just empty. It was so much worse than screaming. Last time she was heartbroken. This time she was an investigator who had closed her case. "Don't," she said, her voice flat. "Don't even start. I know, I called the hotel. I know her name. I know you took the day off to be with her. The same month we decided to try for this baby, you went right back to her." She said it all so calmly, like she was reading a weather report. She had seen the architecture of my lies, the whole ugly structure, and she was just describing it. She saw the broken man in his entirety. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. What was there to say? She was right. "I want you to pack a bag," she said, still in that terrifyingly steady voice. "You can stay at your brother's. We'll figure out the logistics for seeing our son. We need to talk to a lawyer about separation. Separation. The word hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't an angry threat, it was a practical next step. A done deal. In her mind, our marriage was already over. This was it. The final abandonment I had been waiting for my entire life, the one I'd been running from since I was 4 years old. The broken man inside me, the one who only knows how to run or how to self-destruct, took over. The thought of her with someone else, of another man in my house being a father to my son. It wasn't just jealousy. It was a physical rejection, like my body trying to turn itself inside out. She is a part of me. The good part. You can't just cut that off and give it to someone else. It felt like dying. No, I whispered. My legs gave out and I slid down the wall to the floor. Anna, no, you can't. I can't, what she asked, her voice cracking for the first time. I can't keep living like this. I can't be married to a ghost. I can't do this to our son. I can't live without you, I said, the words spilling out because they were the truest thing I had. If you leave, I'm done. I can't do this. I won't. I put my head in my hands and just broke. It wasn't a strategy. It wasn't a trick to make her stay. It was the bottom. Without her, without my family, I am nothing but the broken parts. And I can't live like that. I won't. I heard her chair scrape against the floor. I braced myself for the sound of her footsteps walking away for the front door, closing and leaving me in the silence. But instead I heard a sob. She was in front of me, sinking to her knees. Don't you dare, she whispered, her voice raw with a fury I'd never heard before. Don't you dare put that on me. You don't get to break everything and then threaten to leave me to clean up the mess. You fight. You hear me. You stay here and you fight. Something shifted in that moment. She was looking at me, at the complete wreck on her kitchen floor, at the abyss I'd shown her, and she wasn't running. She was yelling back at it. She grabbed my face, forcing me to look at her. Her eyes were full of tears, but they were different now. They were strong. I'm not that girl anymore, she said, her voice shaking but firm. I'm not the one you can lie to. My world doesn't revolve around you anymore. It revolves around our son. And he deserves a father who isn't a coward. She made me a deal. I could stay. We would get through Thanksgiving, through Christmas for our son. I would go back to therapy. I would do whatever it took. But she made no promises. In January, she said we would talk again. And then she would decide if there was anything left of me or of us worth saving. So now I'm living on borrowed time. Every morning I wake up with a gut-wrenching dread, but also a tiny, unfamiliar flicker of something else. Hope, maybe. For the first time, she has seen all of me, the good man she fell in love with, and the broken, pathetic monster he hides. And she's still here. She knows her own worth now, and she's choosing for now to see if I can finally find mine. Waiting for January is a special kind of hell. This Christmas will feel like a performance, a reenactment of the family I've always dreamed of. I know it might be our last. It's my one last chance to face the man I actually am and see if the good man can finally, for once, win the fight. My husband Mark thinks I cheated on him. He's probably telling his friends and family that I had an affair, and that's why he's filing for divorce. It's a simple, clean story, and it makes him the good guy. The truth is, our marriage was a corpse long before I ever sent a text message to another man. I was just the one who finally got tired of pretending to be in mourning. For the last 10 years, we've been roommates. Not even good roommates, just two people who split the bills and shared a mortgage. We didn't talk, not really. Our conversations were about logistics. Who's picking up the kids? Did you remember to take the trash out? The roof is going to need replacing in a few years. I felt like another item on his household checklist. Fix the gutters, pay the property taxes, make sure the wife is functioning. He's a good man in the way people describe a reliable car. He starts every morning, he doesn't break down, he gets you from A to B, but there's no joy in it. He never looked at me like he actually times wanted times me. He just looked at me like he was used to me being there. The silence was the worst part. We could sit in the same room for hours and not say a word. I'd try, I really would. I'd ask about his day and he'd say, fine. I'd try to tell him a funny story and he'd give me a tight little smile while staring at the TV. It was like shouting into a void. After a while, you just stop shouting. You start to believe you don't have a voice. We went to counseling once a few years ago. It was my idea, of course. For him, it was just another problem to solve. He sat there, answered the therapist's questions like he was on a job interview, and waited for her to give him a list of instructions to fix me. He never understood that it wasn't about fixing anything. It was about feeling something. We stopped going after a few sessions. It was a waste of money, he said. I was so lonely I thought it was going to physically kill me. You can't understand that kind of loneliness unless you've lived it, sleeping next to someone every night and feeling like you're on a different planet. Then I met Jack at my new job. It wasn't some grand romance. It was just easy. We were working on a project together and he made a stupid joke. I laughed a real laugh and it felt like a muscle I hadn't used in years. We started talking more at work and then it turned into texting. It was nothing serious. We'd send memes, complain about our boss, talk about what we were watching on TV. He was just a friend. But he was a friend who listened. He asked questions and actually waited for the answers. When I said something I thought was clever, he'd text back LOL or tell me I was funny. It was a tiny little spark of light in the gray, suffocating fog of my home life. Was it flirty sometimes? I guess in a harmless way. It was fun. It was a reminder that I was still a person. I wasn't just a mom, a wife, a household manager. I was someone who could be interesting and witty. I was alive. Of course, Mark found out. And he didn't find out because I told him, which I should have. He found out because he waited until I was asleep and went through my phone. He didn't come to me and say, hey, I'm feeling insecure or I'm worried about us. He went behind my back like a spy, looking for evidence to prove his worst fears. The confrontation was awful. He didn't ask me why. He didn't ask if I was unhappy. He just held up the phone like a prosecutor revealing the murder weapon. He accused me of sleeping with Jack, of planning to leave him. His paranoia was suffocating. So I did something stupid. I panicked. He was watching my phone like a hawk, and every notification from Jack Harkness sent him into a rage. I changed Jack's name in my contacts to a woman's name. I just wanted to stop the constant third degree. I also deleted some of our conversations. Not because there was anything incriminating in them, but because I knew Mark would twist every single word. There was one text Jack sent on Thanksgiving when I was stressing about the turkey. I sent him a picture of my messy kitchen, and he wrote back, "That level of turkey prep is so hot." Jack's a goofy guy. He says weird stuff like that. To Mark, it was a confession of a passionate affair. I was just trying to protect a simple friendship from my husband's insane jealousy. I was trying to keep that one small, happy part of my life for myself. That was the real start of the war. My phone became the battlefield. He demanded I give him the passcode and allow him unrestricted access to everything, my texts, my emails, my social media. He wanted to read every word I typed to anyone. He said it was the only way he could ever trust me again. But it wasn't about trust. It was about control. It was about him punishing me for finding a moment of happiness outside of him. I refused. That phone, that little bit of privacy, was the only thing I had left that was mine. It wasn't about Jack anymore. It was about me refusing to be treated like a prisoner in my own life. I told him no. I told him he needed to get help for his paranoia and his insecurity, and that my privacy wasn't the price for his peace of mind. The fights got worse. He'd follow me from room to room, demanding the phone, his voice getting louder and colder. Last night was the worst it's ever been. I told him for what felt like the 100th time that he was not going to get my passcode. I was done being interrogated. "This isn't about the phone, Mark," I said, my voice shaking. "This is about you never seeing me, and I'm not going to let you control me now." He just stopped. He wasn't yelling anymore. All the rage drained from his face and was replaced by something else, something terrifyingly calm. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in what felt like years. And all I saw was ice. "You're right," he said, his voice flat. "It isn't about the phone." He picked up his own phone from the counter. "There are other ways to find out what's going on." I watched him as he tapped on his screen, his thumb moving with a purpose I hadn't seen in him for years. My stomach twisted. He wasn't searching for information. He was searching for a person. It took me a second to realize what he was doing. He was on social media looking for Jack. Not Jack, but Jack's wife. He was going to find her. He was going to blow everything up. "Mark, don't," I whispered, a real primal fear cutting through my anger. "Please. You have no idea what you're doing." He didn't look up from his phone. "I know exactly what I'm doing." "You wanted to hide things. Fine. Let's bring it all into the light." He found her profile. I saw a picture of her and Jack with their 2 kids at a pumpkin patch. A happy family. A normal family. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't about us anymore. He was pulling innocent people into his war. "She has nothing to do with this," I pleaded, taking a step towards him. "This is between you and me." He finally looked at me and his eyes were completely empty. "You made it about them when you started texting her husband behind my back." He tapped out a message, his face illuminated by the cold blue light of the screen. I felt like I was going to be sick. I didn't know what he wrote, but I could imagine. Something cold and factual, designed for maximum damage. Asterisk. "Your husband has been having an inappropriate relationship with my wife. You should check his phone." Asterisk. He hit send, then set his phone down on the counter with a quiet final click. He had just dropped a bomb, and now he was waiting for it to go off. It didn't take long, maybe 15 minutes. My phone buzzed. It was Jack. I answered, my hand shaking. "What the hell did you do?" he whispered, his voice frantic. "My wife is losing her mind. She just got a message from your husband. He sent her screenshots." "Screenshots, you idiot. Why didn't you delete everything?" The blood drained from my face. Screenshots. Mark hadn't just found the text. He had documented them. The goofy joke about the turkey, the late-night complaints about work. He'd saved them like ammunition. He'd been preparing for this. "I'm so sorry, Jack," I stammered. "I had no idea he would." "My life is blowing up right now because of you," he cut me off, his voice cracking. "I can't talk to you ever again. Lose my number." He hung up. And just like that, it was over. The one small friendship, the one little escape was gone. Erased. I stood in the kitchen, the silence rushing back in heavier and more menacing than ever before. Mark was watching me, his expression unreadable. "There," he said, as if he'd just finished a chore. "Now we know." "Know what, Mark?" I snapped, the shock finally giving way to a white-hot fury. "What do we know?" "That you're cruel enough to ruin someone's life just to prove a point. That you're a coward who attacks other people because you can't handle your own feelings." He didn't even flinch. I did what I had to do. "You refused to be honest with me." It was his new mantra. He wasn't a paranoid, controlling husband. He was a rational man forced into a corner. He had calmly and logically detonated our lives, and now he was standing back pretending to be a victim of the blast. The next few days were a special kind of hell. We lived in the same house but didn't speak. The air was thick with hate. I felt like I was suffocating. I went to work and pretended everything was fine, terrified that at any moment HR would call me into an office. I imagined the whispers. Jack and I worked in the same department. Mark hadn't just destroyed a friendship. He'd jeopardized my career. All to win a fight I didn't even know we were having. A week later, I came home to an envelope on the kitchen table with my name on it. It wasn't sealed. Inside were divorce papers. He hadn't even had the decency to hand them to me to look me in the eye. It was just another piece of administrative work left for me to handle. Underneath the papers was a sticky note in his neat block handwriting. Asterisk. I've moved some things to the guest room. I'll be staying there until we sort this out. I think it's for the best. Asterisk. For the best. After 17 years of marriage, this is how it ended. With a stack of legal documents and a note like he was reminding me to pick up milk. He's telling people I'm showing my true colors now. He's right about that. He is finally seeing them. He's seen the color of rage from a woman who screamed for his attention for a decade only to be met with silence. He's seeing the pain of a wife who was treated like a faulty appliance that needed to be managed, not a person who needed to be loved. And he's seeing the fury of a human being whose entire world he methodically set on fire just to prove he was right all along. He tells his story, and it's neat and tidy. The wife had an emotional affair, she lied and hid it, and the heartbroken husband had no choice but to end the marriage. But his story leaves out the years of crushing loneliness. It leaves out the suffocating quiet of a home where no one ever really talked. It leaves out a man who could diagnose a problem with the roof, from a single water stain, but couldn't see that his own wife was drowning right in front of him. He thinks this was all about Jack. He honestly believes that if he had just gotten into my phone and read all my messages, he could have fixed the problem. He could have eliminated the threat, and things would have gone back to normal. He never understood. It was never about Jack. It was about the silence he left, the void he created. Jack didn't break our marriage. He just happened to be the person who showed me what it felt like to not be alone. And for that, Mark could never forgive me. It was always about him. It was always about him.